The April 12th, 2022 regular meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. This regular meeting will be followed by a work session tonight and by a short closed session after that. I mentioned a few minutes ago, and I'll just repeat, if any of you are here and wish to speak to the Village Council tonight on any subject, whether it's on the agenda or not, you're welcome to do that at the end of our regular meeting. And there's a form in the back table for you to sign in. So if you haven't done that already, I would ask you to do so because the clerk will remove that form in a few minutes, and then we'll work from that when we get to public comments at the end of our regular agenda. I would also indicate that I know there are people, as always, thankfully, watching this online or live stream. And if you, in that audience, have any comments that you would like to make to the Village Council, you may do so by sending an email to the following address. It's public comments, one word, two C's, public comments at vopnc.org. Those comments will be received, of course, in written form, and the clerk will circulate those comments to members of the Village Council and to appropriate staff as necessary after the meeting. They will not be read at this meeting, but they will be circulated there. Having said all that, and with the knowledge that the sign-in form will be removed in a minute or two, we'll go on from the call to order and get to our reports for the evening from the village manager and the village council before moving into our agenda. So I'll first call on Jeff Sanborn, our village manager, for your reports of the day. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you, John. I have three things I'd like to cover, and these all have to do with events that are coming up here in the village. The first is next Monday at 1 o'clock. We're holding our next chapter celebration at the Given Memorial Library. Monday is the first day that the Village of Pinehurst is solely responsible for the delivery of library and archive services to our village. And so we're having a celebration there at the library building at 1 o'clock on Monday. And we have a little gift to give out to the first 120 folks that show up for that event. The second is, I think a lot of folks are familiar with the fact that we do a Shop Small event around the Thanksgiving time frame every year. We're expanding that this year and doing one in the spring as well. And the time frame is the 24th of April through the 7th of May, and it'll be run very similarly to the way we have done that in the past for Thanksgiving. Folks that shop in our small village shops downtown can stop by and drop off a receipt in the Welcome Center and enter into a drawing for a prize basket. And then the third thing is on April 26th, we're going to be sponsoring a community cleanup event, and folks can go on to VOPNC.org and register for that event. It will begin at 10 o'clock, and we'll be starting that cleanup effort in two different locations. The first is at the Fair Barn, and the second is at the Community Center. That's all I've got, John.
Jeff, thanks very much. I have a number of acknowledgments and reports I want to make tonight. I know other council members do as well. I would just make note, because they're important, of the following. First of all, last week we had two thank you luncheons, one for volunteers. Some of you sitting in this room were present at that because you volunteer on one or another of our boards. We want to thank you very much publicly tonight, but also for attending that luncheon last week for your time, those of you who are residents in Pinehurst and volunteer for our boards. We had also a board meeting, or a thank you meeting that had been postponed a little bit for our staff, for people on the staff who had won significant awards during the year from their colleagues. And again, want to acknowledge the good work that our staff does in support of the policies and procedures created by the Village Council. Finally, with respect to those sort of updates, we also had a lunch, some of the council members and Jeff Sanborn at the Women's Exchange last Friday. This is the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the Pinehurst Women's Exchange. They've been inviting special groups and guests to stop by and have lunch there this last several months, and we were honored to be there on Friday. So we send our significant salute and thank you to the Women's Exchange for being a valuable part of our community and fulfilling a major need there. We'll be talking about some other anniversaries in just a moment. I also want to indicate that yesterday, members of the Village Council and staff and myself had a follow-up phone call with the National Park Service. As you remember, and many of you participated in a program that they were conducting during the last year, an integrity and condition study of the national landmark territory of Pinehurst. That call was a follow-up to a report and discussions with some of you and residents earlier in the month of March. We followed up on some of their recommendations, clarified a few things, and the relationship between the Park Service and the Village of Pinehurst continues to be on a very strong basis, and they've been very supportive in their overall comments of the stewardship of our resources in the landmark territory over the last many, many years. So we're happy to continue that relationship with them. Also, we had on the weekend one of the traditions of springtime in Pinehurst, which is the Matinee Races. I'm sure many of you were able to be there. I hope you won something on one of the races if you put a ticket in. There was no charge for that anyway. It was strictly a volunteer return on that ticket. But the Matinee Races and the harness track are very important resources to the Village of Pinehurst, both the track on the one hand and the harness community represented here by the Pinehurst Driving Club that bring their horses here every winter to train. We know from feedback from owners of the horses that are here and the trainers that they find our track conditions to be really excellent and the overall condition of the facilities that we supply to them here to be very good, and we're looking at ways to improve those in the future and hope that we might gain even more representation from the trainers and the owners who bring their horses south in the wintertime to train before they leave us in May and go back up to race in the Midwest and the North. So we continued that tradition, and we look very much forward to our relationship continuing well into the future. The final note I'll make is that, has been discussed a little bit by Jeff, this is a year when we're celebrating a number of important anniversaries. I mentioned the 100th anniversary of the Women's Exchange, but even more significantly, perhaps, or certainly as significantly, as many of you hopefully know, this is the 200th anniversary this year of the birth of Frederick Law Olmsted, famous landscape architect who, with his firm, outlined the original village of Pinehurst, which encompasses really our National Historic Landmark now. And we also are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the birth of Donald Ross, and the village is engaged in various programs through the year that will help celebrate that. Unfortunately, at Friday Nights Live After 5, Donald Ross, who was to be present, had a hip problem which is being taken care of, and he was unable to attend Live After 5, but he'll appear at another event in the springtime as well. But to commemorate these anniversaries of Olmsted and Ross, Village Council and staff have been in touch with our elected representatives to have them read into the record of the state of North Carolina on the one hand and the U.S. Congress on the other, recommendations and recognitions really of these two gentlemen who made such a difference in Pinehurst and where we are today. So I have here a document that was read into the record by our Representative Jamie Bowles to the state legislature last week, honoring the 200th anniversary of Mr. Olmsted and his contribution to Pinehurst, starting in 1895 and continuing to 2022, and we hope well beyond. So we thank Representative Bowles for that. And working with Councilmember Lydia Bosch, we have a couple other such recognitions, and Lydia, I'll call on you for those now and any other reports you wish to make tonight.
Thank you, John. I just received today two statements that Congressman Richard Hudson read into the United States Congress last week. One is a statement honoring the life and legacy of Frederick Law Olmsted, and the other honoring the life and legacy of Donald Ross, and these are treasures. And so I'll give Kelly a copy of these. Maybe they can go into the record. Some other things I wanted to bring up is next Monday, there's going to be a meeting in here at next Tuesday at 6:30. We are looking at putting walkways in along Pine Vista between Linden Road and Burning Tree, and also on McKenzie from Linden Road over to Rasty Wicker. So at 6:30, there will be a public community meeting just to look at those plans and discuss those plans. So that's next Tuesday at 6:30. Also, the CVB Board of Directors met last week and reported out that North Carolina is now the 5th most visited state in the United States. And they also had a story that was in the pilot this week. The top 100 golf courses in North Carolina were just announced. 16 of those 100 are here in the Sand Hills area. Pinehurst number 2, of course number 2 was ranked number 1. But the executive director of the panel that made this selection said to have so many tremendous courses within miles of each other is remarkable. There truly is no place like Pinehurst in the world. And that's in this article in the pilot. Also from the CVB, they are sponsoring something called a Sand Hills Pour Tour. And there's 7 breweries that are participating, so you can go to any of these breweries. You can pick one of these up, you get it stamped, and after you've gotten all 7 stamped, you can go to CVB and you can get a commemorative mug. And they also have some Donald Ross commemorative coins. They're like challenge coins. And while supplies are last and they're having to buy more because they're so popular, you can also get one of those coins. So I think that's it. Thanks, John.
Lydia, thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Pat Pizzella.
Yes, first I'd like to mention that the mayor was a little modest regarding the matinee races around the track over the weekend. For those of you who missed it, he actually got in the harness and rode around that track. His horse did not win, but he obviously lived to share this meeting. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for representing the village so well.
I now know what a mutter really means because it's a little muddy behind those horses. Thank you, Pat. Go ahead.
Secondly, I want to compliment the turnout tonight of our citizens here in the village, and I'm hopeful that there's many more watching. I have, since I first decided to run for this office, has encouraged as much citizen participation as possible. And one of the topics we'll be discussing tonight is the neighborhood advisory committees. And so I'm a proponent of more citizen participation, and I encourage you to come to other meetings, even if they're not as exciting as this one might be, but come to other meetings and bring your friends and neighbors. We're a village of 17,000 people. All the elected officials in the village of Pinehurst are sitting right before you tonight, all 5 of us. And it's good to see the residents and constituents here taking part in their government. Lastly, due to the recommendation of the mayor and the approval of the mayors of Foxfire and Southern Pines, I have been appointed to be the Moore County Municipal Representative on the Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization. That's known as TARPO, for those of you who follow acronyms, and the Rural Transportation Advisory Committee. There's actually going to be a meeting this week that I'll be attending, my first one, and I'll report back to council and our residents as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hogeman.
I have nothing further to report.
Councilmember Morgan.
I concur with Councilmember Pizzella on the modesty of the race. I was impressed also. A little more information on there was that all the mayors were racing from Aberdeen, Foxfire, and Southern Pines, and our mayor graciously took the mud and allowed them to win, so they're happy. And they'll come back next year. So, but very impressed on the community support, not only from Pinehurst, but throughout the area. Lots of representation from Fort Bragg and a lot of the townships around. It was a great event and a wonderful time, as was Live After 5. On March 23rd, I had a meeting with the Triangle J Council of Governments. Variety of things discussed. There's 3 that are pertinent to us. There is an RDU funding letter writing campaign that's going on. So if you use the RDU airport, they're trying to build some infrastructure, and on their website they have a letter writing campaign if you wish to be involved in that. Second thing on there is that the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, looking at electric vehicles and infrastructure updates, talking about different types of infrastructure and different type of grants that are there, potential for us. And more specifically on the Triangle Transportation Choices, Transportation Demand Management, there are program funding updates to allow electric vehicle hookups and things like that as grants that we can apply for to see if we can bring those into it. A lot of that is where they're looking at different routes that people frequently go to. Certainly, we are a destination site for many folks in the North Carolina area, but maybe an area for the staff to be able to look at that for some funding grants. That's all I have to report.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I would have to say that the report you've just made with respect to the Council of Governments and Pat's comments about TARPO are very important to us, because so much of what controls and contributes to what happens in Pinehurst happens outside of Pinehurst. And these two groups, transportation, planning, are very important that we have representation on and knowledge about what's going on around us, because it does, as you all know, have a major effect on what happens in the village and the other communities here in southern Moore County. So I'm very happy that we can have these two folks following up on those committees. Having completed these reports, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is a motion to approve the consent agenda. Before asking for that motion, are there any parts of those reports that a council member has questions about or wishes to pull out for further consideration? Having seen none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
I second.
A second by Pat Pizzella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 4. That's a fiscal year 2023 strategic operating plan preview. And I underscore the word preview while Jeff is getting ready, because this is the first pass, if you will, of the proposed fiscal 2023 budget and the 5 years following. And this presentation tonight is to give Village Council and those of you here the first orientation to where our funding will be and the priorities that we've set for the next year. We will have further discussion on that, as Jeff will discuss during the month of May. But for the moment, Jeff, thank you very much for giving us a preview.
All right, thank you. And thank you for introducing the topic for me, John, while I got myself situated.
Jeff, you might need to bring that microphone a little bit up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think as John was describing, this is a preview, and what we really need to do here is make sure that we've got all the big pieces right before we start to produce something that looks like this. And we've crunched all the numbers. There's no more detailed work to be done unless you give us guidance back on what we're going to show you here. But this takes quite a lot of effort to produce our annual strategic operating plan. Before we start putting a lot of words on paper, we want to make sure that we've got it pretty close to being right. So we're going to talk about some of the major opportunities for improvement and innovation that are in this 5-year plan, and then also reviewing the 5-year financial plan. And now this isn't working. There we go. All right. During the strategic retreat, Council, you recall that you identified, based on the work that we did, 3 areas of focus, and those are managing development to protect the village character, supporting the business community, and providing a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. And as a refresher, some of the key information that we looked at in order to arrive at these areas of focus were the performance gaps that we have when we compare ourselves to other communities, areas that our annual community survey tell us there's a significant amount of dissatisfaction with, and then also strategic challenges and strategic opportunities that were identified as part of that strategic retreat process. And as I go through this, I'll be making a point to highlight the things that are in this plan that address these 3 areas of focus. All right. So again, we're going to be talking about the significant opportunities for improvement and innovation. You won't see all of them. There are a lot of minor projects and things that are built into this plan that probably don't really need your attention at this level. So when we talk about opportunities for improvements and innovation, and this is not new, we break things out into evaluations, projects, and initiative action plans. We're careful to make sure that before we start spending money and resources on things, we know what we want to do and the best way to accomplish it. And so in many cases, We build into a plan a requirement to do an evaluation, and then once we've got got ourselves set that we need to do something and what we need to do about a particular problem, it might later result in a project or an initiative action plan. So here are the 8 initiative action plans that are built into the information that you're going to see in subsequent slides. And I need to orient you to this slide first. You can see that on the left, you can see strategic objectives. These are from our balanced scorecard. So what we're showing here is how initiative action plans, which are shown in the second column, align with the strategic objectives that are on our balanced scorecard. And then those things that are identified in red are the areas of focus that I identified previously. Now, you also see that there's some things there in blue, and that's because we're at a point where we're going to need to get some initial guidance from the council on some of these priorities. In most years, we come out of the strategic retreat and we get your list of priorities and we do the work on it, and everything kind of works out. We're able to build a 5-year plan that keeps things in the right within the right financial parameters that we're comfortable with, so we can come back and make a very sound recommendation to you. In this case, we have a little bit of a blip, and that's the reason for the information you see in blue. And the blip relates to really the out years in 26 and 27, when we start adding a potential 3rd fire station, and also, part of the way along that path is the addition of the potential ladder truck to our fire department. And what you're going to see in subsequent slides is that if you take those 2 priorities out of this 5-year plan, then things work out pretty nicely. We can continue on the path with regard to the tax rate policy that was approved in last year's plan, and we can accommodate all the things that we identified in the strategic retreat with no problems. When you add the fire station, things get a little bit dicey. And there's a potential to look at that capital requirement and think about it as a capital requirement and think, well, gosh, that's public safety. We got to make that priority number 1, so why is that not in this plan automatically? But the problem is, it's not really the capital that makes this plan problematic. It's the operating expense. And there are no additions to the way we currently operate that are easily swappable, or you can't trade it out in terms of dealing with the operating expense of bringing on 9 additional firefighters and all the additional operating expenses and annual operating expenses that will be associated with running a 3rd fire station. So that's the way we chose to depict it like this. And with that, again, you'll see a little bit more information as we go through this. So I'm going to start at the top. So you see design, build, staff, and equip Fire Station 93. In FY26, if we're going to do that, design work would be about $400,000, and then you see $167,000 in FY27. That would be the starting of the debt service associated with building that facility in 2027. There would be added expenses associated with that IAP if we chose to do it, associated with the staffing, completing the staffing of that fire station in the out years, and then also the ongoing operating expenses on top of the debt service. Then we can move down to the next strategic objective: managing development to protect village character, relocation of the public services complex to allow for redevelopment of Village Place. We put it there because it's necessary in order to accommodate what's anticipated for the small area plan for Village Place and Rattlesnake Trail, and we recognize that the current public services complex really doesn't do much with regard to creating the right character for our downtown environment. So it would probably be better in that regard to relocate the public services to some other place. And so what you see in FY23 is potential property acquisition for some location for the public services facility. And then in 24 would be design work. And then we don't actually anticipate moving it in this plan. That would be, those would be decisions that would be made later on. Updating the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, you see it listed there. It won't be a, yeah.
So the $425,000 includes nothing for the movement.
That's right.
Okay.
Those would be in the out years. Sometime, a time to be determined. With regard to updating the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, you can see we show no expense there, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be free. That's money that was actually budgeted for this year. $200,000 was allocated in this year's budget for that effort to do that comprehensive update on the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. It's no secret that we're kind of behind on a lot of planning and zoning related work that we're doing right now. And so what will actually happen is that money from this year will roll forward to next year, and we'll take care of that as with a budget update that you'll have to approve around the 1st of July. And then you also see the completion of the small area plans for Village Place, Rattlesnake Trail, and also Pinehurst South, and that is work that's ongoing. Under support the business community, you see expanding downtown parking facilities. In the previous year's plan, we had that effort beginning in 2023. We have learned in recent months that that's not feasible based on negotiations with the resort and approvals that they might have to get from their lenders in order to allow something like that to happen. This is specifically in relation to the potential carriage house that has been envisioned in the past and may still be viable in the future to be constructed behind the Holly Inn. So right now we think best case it's realistic to start that project after the U.S. Open, and so that's where you see design work in 25, and then you see construction in beginning in 26. Now you see blue numbers there again, and they're blue because if we do the fire station and also do the ladder truck purchase, then we're going to wind up having to finance that project instead of paying for it with cash. And so, I mean, it looks like a good news story there because those numbers are smaller, but what's really happening in there is we have an annual finance charge that's associated with that.
The way it's presented, it looks like it's less expensive to include the fire initiative action plan than it is to leave it out. It's counterintuitive.
Because rather than paying for something all up front, you're starting a long-term financing plan. So what you're only seeing the portion of that expenditure that occurs in this 5-year plan.
Whatever we would be servicing through debt if we were to do that.
That's right.
It's not here.
That's right. And then finally, or not finally, but the last area of focus is providing a safe and effective multimodal transportation plan. You can see that we have a plan to do a multimodal, consolidated multimodal transportation plan in FY24, and that $100,000 that's shown there is to facilitate that work. And moving on, providing recreation programs and facilities. What you see here is kind of the compromise that we reached during the strategic retreat with regard to discussions about developing West Pinehurst Park. And we recognize that although we have significant pressure on our current ball fields, both baseball and soccer here in the downtown area, that if we put synthetic turf on those fields, we could accommodate a lot more traffic throughout the year, more games, more practices, and we wouldn't necessarily need to do that investment as soon in West Pinehurst Park. And so this is what that looks like. So you see in FY '23, 1.2 million, that's for the big baseball, softball field. And then in FY '25, you see the small baseball, softball field. And then what you see in those intervening years are the offsets to the operating expense that are associated with the efficiencies that you gain by not having to maintain all that natural grass.
Jeff, I think as you said, but just to underscore it, this is all related to our current fields, not West Pinehurst Park.
Current
when you
field.
said
These are in Cannon
Well,
Park.
And Cannon Park.
Yes, right.
I want to make that clear for everybody. That's in the Cannon Park fields would potentially receive this retrofit of the.
That's
turf.
right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that opportunity to clarify that, John. And then finally, providing library and archive services. I think everybody's is aware that we're under contract to do just that. And I talked about our next chapter opening ceremony next Monday. In '24, we anticipate through a fundraising campaign that would be led by the Given Tufts organization that we may get as much as $1 million to kickstart that effort. And then we would have build in 2025, and then what you see beyond that is the ongoing operating expenses associated with that new facility.
Bring it back up.
Okay, any other questions on that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
And actually, this is, I think, the benefit for all the people who are here. It's my understanding, we've been told in the past, that not many municipalities do a 5-year plan. And what's the benefit of doing that? I think I know the benefit, but I think it's,
Yeah.
People sitting here may look at this and think, we are locked in to these numbers in these 5 years. But we do this, and what benefit do you as staff and we as council benefit from having a 5-year plan?
Well, I think what the primary benefit is, it helps to eliminate blind spots because you can forecast what's going to happen over a 5-year period. And sometimes you might make a decision with regard to, let's say, a major project. You say you want to build a library this year, right? Without contemplating the impacts of something like that on operating expenses in the out years, you really kind of lose track of what the burden is, the tax burden is going to be on your community. So it helps us to make informed decisions in that regard. And to your point about this forecasting, what the 5-year plan methodology allows us to do is build a budget that is adopted by the council each year for 1 year. And then everything in the 5-year plan is just a plan. It's telling us where we think we're going. And then the next year, we're going to go through the effort to update that plan again, and it might look a little bit different, or it might look a lot different. But at least we have a sense for where we're going, and we don't have to recreate the wheel, or reinvent the wheel every year. Does that answer the question?
It does answer the question. And if you looked at last year's 5-year plan and this one, they're going to be different for the very reason you just said. So it was useful for me to have staff explain that to us year after year. Very few communities do this, and the benefit to us of doing it. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
I had a couple of questions,
Yeah.
too, if I could. Do we have sort of a rough idea of what it might cost to actually do the moving of the public works and what the timing might be for that?
Jeff, have we done any work on that in the past yet?
I asked to answer the second question first, and I think Jeff alluded to, we don't have a timeline on the actual move. The information that we have is honestly so dated, I'd be hesitant to even throw it out there on terms of a move. We had some estimates years ago based on some designs, but depending on the site, the designs could be very, very different from those. And so if I was to just throw a dart on the wall, you're probably in a $4.5 to $5.5 million range, would be my guess.
Okay, thank you.
I just, based on that comment, I think we as a council certainly need to keep in mind that that public services complex is vital to whatever we're going to do in the Village Place world. So I think we ought to keep that in mind as a priority, because if we don't make that available, they can't develop on top of our dump trucks, to put it bluntly. So we just need to keep our priorities. These are good things to look at, but I see nothing that comes close to what's important to the overall resolution to the Village Place and our development than that public services complex. And I know the staff is working on providing some options, and we'll just look forward to that so we can make some other decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Jane, you
One-
had a couple
One
more
other
questions.
point on that, before we move on, if you don't mind, Jane.
Fine.
It also might help to point out that, while that is going to be a significant expense, and while we have a $350,000 earmarked for purchasing land somewhere, and that may or may not be exactly the right number, but the reality is that if we do make this move, we're going to be coming off a very valuable piece of property.
That's right.
That's not going to offset the total cost, but, Jane?
Thank you. What is the priority level of the ladder truck?
Yeah. Good question, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on. I guess with regard to the ladder truck, we got to think about where's the tipping point. And, there are only certain areas and structures that require ladder truck service. We've operated okay for decades with a lot of that stuff in the village already, the major hotels, the hospital, some of our multifamily structures. The current model recognizes that we have mutual aid agreements with Southern Pines and Aberdeen, who both have ladder trucks because they have a lot more commercial development. Now, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't make sense for us to have our own, because we can respond quicker from, our closer, our fire stations, which are potentially closer to wherever those fires might take place. And we continue to see a little bit, more multi-story development, particularly in the medical district. It's also true that these new state-of-the-art modern facilities are, built with very little wood and a lot of sprinkling. So I think it's something for us to contemplate, and that's why, this question of the fire station and the ladder truck, we didn't throw them out, we brought them to you as options, because these are public safety questions, and I think it's important to let you give us some feedback on what you want to build into this. Now, you're going to see later on that there's an option to add in the ladder truck, and it probably works out without changing our tax structure. It's not an optimal addition to the ladder truck capability to our fleet, but it's better than we have right now, and so I'll talk about that a little bit later on.
And the staffing it would need. Because we've got quite a list of projects, each one of which has its own merit and attractiveness to do.
Yeah.
And yet when you try and put them all in the hopper, you run out of room.
Right.
So we're going to need, I think, to prioritize a little bit and maybe set some aside for another day.
And I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but since you mentioned ladder truck staffing, there's some of what we're showing you here is art. Because we recognize that we could add the ladder truck as almost a purely capital expense, and rely on our rescue truck staffing to kind of dual slot our rescue truck staffing to staff the ladder truck. It's 6 people versus 6 people. The only problem arises is if you have the rescue truck folks out on an EMS call, because that's what they do. They go out and do the EMS work. They're the first line of defense for us in helping the county's ambulance folks with that problem set across the village and other areas. The problem arises if we have those folks out on a medical-related call, they're not immediately available to respond to that ladder truck type of emergency, which is going to happen once in a, maybe never, you know? So there's some balancing there. Now, what we built into these projections for you to look at was the addition of the ladder truck and the 6 people that would facilitate staffing that ladder truck exclusively. So we would avoid that potential overlap problem. And we did that because it's kind of a sneak peek at what happens to this plan when you potentially add the 3rd fire station. Because those 6 people are 6 of 9 people that would be required to staff the 3rd fire station. And based on the timelines, you don't really get to see the impact of that in this, because it would, the staffing and operating costs would have happened outside the 5-year plan. So this gives you a glimpse at where that's heading if you add those 6 people. It also allows you, if you want to do that, go ahead and pursue this option of building the 3rd fire station. If it might work out, it might make sense to go ahead and do it, because you're starting to bite off chunks of it rather than doing it all at once. And it might be more palatable for a lot of different reasons. So did that help?
Yeah, I think it's going to be helpful to have as much information as we can about the priority of that project and some of the others.
Yeah.
Because when I hear, public safety, I think, well, that's got to come first,
Yeah.
But I don't know myself, just kind of sitting here spinning around my chair, how necessary it is. So giving us a good idea of that would be a big help, and trying to, because there's an awful lot of projects in here, and maybe we have to weed somewhere.
Yeah. And certainly the public safety angle resonates with us as well.
Yep.
I had a conversation with you right before we
Right.
started about this, but I mean, the problem with the 3rd fire station deal, and recognizing that it is public safety, and there's still a cost-benefit analysis on there, but the problem is there's nothing you can trade it off with. There's nothing, because it's operating expenses, and the only other significant operating expenses that are added to this, not added, but in this 5-year plan, in other words, in addition to what we currently do, are the expansion of the library, which we're under contract to do, and the addition of 2 police officers, which are also public safety. So, but we get it. We understand. So, okay. So we'll move on to projects. And again, this isn't all of them, but these are some of the major ones. You see that over a 5-year, the 5-year plan, we have $2 million in this 5-year plan for the construction of pedestrian facilities, not unlike what Lydia mentioned earlier with regard to what's in this year's plan that we're trying to complete potentially on Pine Vista and on McKenzie. And that has been something that we have had in previous plans over the 5-year horizon as well. Continue to pick away at that lack of pedestrian facilities across our community. We also have almost $2 million spread out over 5 years for continued stormwater improvements, and some of that will be targeted specifically at what's coming out of our stormwater master plan that's underway right now. You see a ladder truck right there, $1.7 million. That's our guess right now. You might hear us talk in the future about ladder truck versus a quint, which is a little bit different capability. A quint is kind of a Swiss Army knife approach to fire apparatus. It's both an engine and a ladder truck, and it might prove to be a more efficient way to do things. We'll have continued discussions about that. What we see in this plan is a ladder truck. A Quint would probably be roughly the same price, maybe slightly more. You see in FY '27 $1 million, and this is the result of the discussions during the strategic retreat in FY '27, so that's the last year of this plan, and that is not specifically earmarked for any requirement, but it's in anticipation of, based on the master plan that was developed, we think we're probably heading in the direction of no utilities out there, but we would still need to put in potentially restrooms and septic and a well. And we might want to start doing some initial investments on things like a dog park and walking trails and things like that. So that $1 million is in there to accommodate those future decisions. Plenty of time to figure that out.
Jeff, just to go back to that, it's purchase a ladder truck. Is that right? Not a track.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just
read it and I still read it as truck.
Okay, you mentioned when you started talking about the squint and all, I didn't know if there was some, okay.
Yeah,
No problem.
thank you. Village Place streetscape enhancements. So this has been an ongoing effort. Again, this is a continuation of what we've done like along Magnolia, and we don't have the specifics of this project work yet, but you can envision continuing that effort down the south side of McCaskill, and then maybe going down Rattlesnake as well as we continue to do that similar type of a more appealing streetscape approach to some of these corridors. Public safety radio improvements. We're at a point again where we have to update all of our Viper radio systems. This is one of those deals where Motorola's got all the local governments kind of over a barrel on these requirements, and they keep changing their technology, and so we've got to do a complete overhaul in not only our fire department and our police department, but the good news is we're able to take care of a lot of that expense in our fire department through grants. We don't have the similar opportunities in the police department, but you can see the $375,000 bill there in this plan. Replacing the park lighting at Cannon Park in FY '25. That was in last year's plan as well. Updating our scuba air packs for our fire department. Again, this is a compliance issue. There's new technology out there, and we currently have a little bit of a mix, and it's not necessarily the safest way to operate. So we'd like to get everybody on the same equipment from a safety standpoint and protecting our firefighters. That bill will be about $162,000. We anticipate the need to resurface again the Village Green parking lot before the U.S. Open, and so that's why you see that in FY '24. So that would get the work done immediately prior to the Open. It would look at its peak appearance for that event. And then you see preserving and conserving open space in and around Pinehurst. Maybe we shouldn't have. That's not necessarily labeled as accurately as it can be. If you recall from the comprehensive plan, there was a recommendation for us to pursue a comprehensive conservation plan effort for primarily the ETJ and how we can achieve the preservation of all that rural treed area out there to the extent possible. And so that $50,000 would be associated with that planning effort. That's also in FY '24. All right, if I can get this thing to cooperate. There we go. Okay, and then I mentioned earlier we have evaluations. One birdie, document imaging. We've talked about this at length in a few meetings in the past. This is a big one to wrestle to the ground, but we do want to try to get this one done in FY '23 to try to move past the paper environment that we have right now and get it all consolidated in a way that not only results in digital images, but also creates efficiencies. And creating the efficiencies is the hard part on this thing that we need to tackle. And then on the smaller, more simple evaluations, you can see some of those listed that we have planned here, mostly in 23 and 24. Evaluating ways to automate employee timekeeping, the fire inspections process evaluation, return pickup evaluation. We continue to have a lot of return pickup challenges out there in the community. This is for our solid waste, and trying to figure out how we can be more efficient in preventing that and also accommodating those calls for return pickups. A couple of times over the past 5 or 6 years, we had gone in and looked at, whether or not we want to insource our road patching services based on dissatisfaction we get from our community on a lot of the, particularly the street cuts, utility cuts and things like that. And we're going to take another look at that again here this coming year. And then in 24, we have a plan to do a little bit of work on recruitment and hiring processes, and this is really focused on some of the more innovative approaches using the internships, sponsorships, and apprenticeships to try to find some of that talent or maybe build some of that talent. And of note, we do have a school government intern coming this summer. We hope to learn from that process, and it might better inform our approaches in the future. Okay. And it's not cooperating again. Oh, now it jumped ahead. There we go. Folks have heard a lot about the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and this turned out to be a very good news story for us. So we've got about $5.3 million that over a 2-year period we have access to. And the really good news is that the restrictions on this were recently loosened, and the advice that we got was consistent with really our take on those restrictions. But the advice we got from state officials, school government folks, and other folks was that the best thing you could do with this is to pour it directly into salaries and benefits, and then now you've created greater fund balance that you can use to do whatever you want to do with that money, and while avoiding any associated red tape associated with expenditure of federal dollars for contracting efforts and all that other stuff. So that is what we plan to do, and you'll see that.
I got to ask the question. The
That
advice,
raised a few eyebrows there. Good to
is
speak that through.
the advice from the state was to take this money and spend it on salary and benefits.
That's right.
Yeah, this is a village council member who disagrees with that approach, but please go
Well,
ahead.
So recognize that what you're doing is you're creating an efficient way to move that $5.3 million into your fund balance. Right. Because instead of spending our other funds on salaries and benefits, they sit now in fund balance, and it creates $5.3 million that we can use for whatever priorities we want to use them for.
It's fungible. It's fungible.
It's fungible money, yeah, Jeff.
It's fungible. That's right.
Because they changed, originally it was much more restrictive, and then they changed the rules. And they said that any town or local government can spend up to the first $10 million, and we didn't get $10 million,
Right.
but we're under that, on anything they want. But when you spend the money, you have to report on how you're spending it. So there's all that paperwork that goes along with your spending. So by putting these funds into the salaries and benefits, you avoid the paperwork angle.
Well, let me
More than just
rephrase my
paperwork.
question.
Jane has it right, though.
real-
That's a very good explanation, Jane. That's exactly
There are
right.
real federal
happened.
limitations on contracting as well.
Right.
We have to do certain things certain ways, and you have to advertise certain things certain ways. And
If you
Yeah.
if you were telling me we would shift the money into S&E or S&B account here,
Yep.
and then that would allow us to shift it again somewhere, I'm fine with that.
right,
If that's what I hear, if that's what I'm hearing now.
what it does is it creates $5.3 million that we didn't have previously that we can use for any priority we see fit. And
That carefully.
It's
And at
built
the-
into this plan to address the priorities that I've already identified for our community, so.
And at the end of the day, we'll spend $5.3 million on things like all the capital projects you just listed as we set priorities for that. And that in turn brings funds back into the economy and puts people to work and gets machinery built and fire trucks designed and built, whatever. Stormwater management being a good part of that, for example. So that's the cycle there that I think we've talked about that makes sense.
Yep, that's right. Okay, so a little bit on the tax rate that was approved in or the tax rate projection that was approved in last year's plan. Why am I? All right. What you see here is the tax rate that's built into this year's plan, and it's a reflection of the tax rate that was built into last year's plan. Now, if people haven't been paying attention, this might raise a little bit some eyebrows, because you see some escalation going on there. And, there might be an inclination that some folks, might look at that and say, well, that's because of, growth in our community, or it might be because we're not managing things very well, or what have you. This started 3 years ago in the FY20 plan that we built, when we, in very short order, were hit with two fairly significant shocks. The first was at the time when, people recall when glass was taken out of the recycling stream, and at the same time, our recycling bills, if you will, were significantly increased by the county, and our tipping fees for recycling. And it was because their costs were going up rapidly. I mean, China stopped buying all of our junk, is what happened. And that reverberated all across the United States. So that was a big shock. And then the other big shock was what the state did with regard to trying to shore up the local government pension program, and the required significantly increased withholding requirements that were levied on us back starting in 2020, and they incrementally went up over a period of years. And so what you see going in all the way out to 2024 is a reflection of that 5-year plan that happened back in 2020, when we said this is what it's going to take to accommodate those new requirements. And then in 25, you see that it stays flat, and then in 26 it jumps. And that 26 jump is a reflection of the decision made last year to provide a new service for our community, and that's library and archives. That was the bill associated with doing operating expenses for the library and archives expansion project, and undertaking all that new stuff. And then in 27, we're showing that staying flat again at 33.5 cents. Now, it's also maybe this might be a good time to call attention to the fact that we expect that the county is going to do a revaluation in this coming year, and that's going to result in some changes in the out years, but we can't project those right now. I'll talk about this a little bit later on here, but what we have done in the past is bring you a recommendation for what we call a CPI adjusted revenue neutral tax rate. And what that does is at the time of revaluation, it corrects the tax rate for two things: property appreciation and cost of doing business appreciation at the same time. And so, we'll see how that lands. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would expect that property valuations have probably gone up, and that's going to drive that's going to have the effect of driving future tax rates down, and then it's going to bump back up to accommodate the cost of doing business. That's the thought process on that. Now, whether that results in a lower or higher or the same tax rate scheme you see here, I can't forecast.
when do we expect to see those evaluations adjusted?
I believe the county, or the county plans to do that in 2023, at least based on, I haven't checked with Wayne on that recently, but
Pretty quick.
in 2023, and so we would be armed with that decision, that information going into the next year plan development.
When
So,
we're here next year at this time, that's when we'd probably know that.
Yeah.
so that means that 1 cent hike in 2026, if the evaluations come in like I think a lot of people think, their homes are worth more
Yeah.
now than they were 3-5 years ago,
Mhm.
last time it was done. That means they're going to be paying more
Mm-hmm.
because the value of their home has gone up. So if we were to collect that money, which we will,
Mm-hmm.
but on top of that, increase the rate, then residents are going to be hit twice. They're going to be hit with a rate increase on the property they own, and then they'll be impacted by the value of the property they own, which is increased. So I think we've got to really look at that carefully. I understand the CPI adjustment part, but it seems that things get ratcheted upward.
But the revenue neutral part of it moves it the other direction.
Yeah, that's what I say, we have to watch that CPI revenue neutral, but there's, homeowners can expect two things that'll occur. Their property value is going to increase, which means they're going to pay more in taxes. And they may, or they will, according to this in the near future, also have a rate increase on top of that. So they're going to be taxed more on their increased value of their property, isn't that right?
They won't take, so there's revenue neutral and then there's CPI adjusted. Revenue neutral says that basically the end result is that we get the same amount of revenue from our tax base, which means that if properties appreciate in value, it drives the tax rate down.
It will, is what you're saying, based on what we're projecting.
Well, I can't project that
No,
because
I
that's not
understand,
built
but-
into this, yeah.
But based on
Yeah.
the theory
Yeah.
that you just espoused, that if it's going up, then we don't need the rate to go up.
Well,
Is that what I?
again, so revenue neutral would drive the tax rate down. If property values increase, it would drive the tax rate down. Now, the other part of it, though, the CPI adjusted is everything in the economy is more expensive, so costs go up, revenues should be going up by about the same amount, so it would bump it back in the other direction. Now, whether it lands higher or lower, we don't know. We can't do that calculation at this point. That's next year's discussion anyway, but,
Right,
yeah.
that's helpful, thank you.
Jeff, I don't want to belabor this, but when I say 2.5% annual inflation rate, when I'm considering inflation right now, is that 2.5 realistic? I'm sure we'll discuss this later, but that seems low to me, considering what's going on right now.
The tax rate that was built in last year's plan was based on a 2.5% annual inflation rate. So we're showing you the policy information from previous decisions.
Okay.
Here, 2.5%.
Who knows?
Now, in reality, our 2023 budgets so we don't build our budgets by saying, okay, the police department required $3 million to operate last year, so we're going to increase it by the inflation rate, and that's it. We go line by line, and we figure out what our estimate is year over year to do the same things.
Okay.
And so there's no automatic inflation factor that's built into the 23 budget that we're going to propose to you. The out years are impacted by a projection of inflation because we're not building budgets there. So we do just blanket.
Okay.
I think one of your messages to the council is that we really need to be careful about the commitments we make on these capital expenditure projects that we were looking at about 20 minutes ago, because they get built into that budget. That's part of the
Yeah.
cost of government. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely right. That we, there are impacts, hopefully intended and knowledgeable by us when we make these decisions. But then the formula for how property values are affected by valuation resets like the county will do, and then how we set the tax rate with respect to these other items, inflation included, that's all the formula. Not easy.
Now, before I move on, there's another thing that's all wrapped up in this that is, that we're going to need to consider. When we built this presentation and we did our analysis a couple of weeks ago, we were still waiting on the state's annual sales tax projections. And we usually have it by the time we get to this point. They're a little bit behind this year for reasons we don't understand, but so we built some pretty conservative numbers in our revenue projections with regard to sales tax. We just got that data from the state, and it's much better than the assumptions that we built into this plan. So much so that when you see, regardless of what decisions you make today, when you see this plan come back to you in a few weeks, you might see revenues that are on the order of a penny higher, which creates the flexibility of maybe in the future, if you didn't want to build the fire station into this plan, maybe we find out that next year it fits.
When you say a penny, what do you mean a penny? A rate? What?
And
Or you just being
increased
facetious?
revenues that are equivalent to a penny in tax rate.
I see.
What's equivalent to a penny?
The
Increased
increased revenue we're going to
sales tax
receive for
revenue.
the sales tax, be up about $390,000, something like that, because that's one penny.
On the order of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on, I mean,
Because a penny of property tax
380,000.
is only, 390,000 or 380,000 or
Yeah,
something
every year.
a year, yeah.
Right.
but-
So, a way to look at that is, and you haven't seen this data yet because we haven't flipped that slide, but the tax rate cost associated with building that fire station, at least through this plan, is about a penny and a half. I mean, it starts to make that much more feasible, but I'll give you a recommendation in a few slides here, but that's just, keep that in the back of your mind.
Thank you.
And now this isn't working again. There we go. Get my assist. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to show you three options. This is the base option, and this is what we were recommending is, basically this is where we would land based on what we knew at the time we built this plan. And again, this is without the ladder truck, and it's without the third fire station in the plan. And, I can go through a lot of numbers here, and I will highlight some things for you, but what we focus on when we build these 5-year projections are those bottom two lines. Projected fund balance as a percent of total budget and operating margin. We want to make sure that our fund balance or our forecast for our fund balance stay above your policy floor of 30% if possible. And we want to keep that operating margin between 89 and 91%. And what you can see is this plan, given the tax rate structure that was anticipated in last year's plan, does just that. Now, we see some pretty big fund balance numbers there in the first couple of years, but that was by design. That was a policy decision. We knew we had all these big capital projects on the horizon. We recognized that rather than finance all of that, we should build some capital so that we could, to the extent possible, pay for those projects with cash. And you see the result. We're working back down toward the 30% floor that you have in your fund balance policy. Some orientation to this slide otherwise. You can see the full-time equivalents. In '23, you don't see the addition because you don't see the previous year, but that 158.6 includes 2 additional police officers. Going from 24 to 25, we're dropping a half of a building inspector, and that's in accordance with plans that we've adopted a couple years ago. And then going from 25 to 26, you see the addition of 3 full-time equivalents that are tied to the expansion of the library and archives programs. And then that stays flat at 27. In 23 and 24, you got that new line that we typically wouldn't show. It says general fund, other financing sources. That's a transfer from ARPA to general fund balance. And you see it spread out over 2 years. From a budget development standpoint, it has to be spread over 2 years because you have to adopt a balanced budget. And if we showed more revenue in 23 than we showed in operating expenses, we'd be breaking the law. So we have to show it this way. We anticipate that as we move through the year and we actually recognize our typical budget to actual variance, that we're probably going to be able to make that move of all of that. Or it's not unlikely that we'd be able to move all of those funds into the general fund in 23, but you see it broken out over 2 years here. So that's that $5.3 million in ARPA funds. Under other financing uses, that's money moving out of the general fund and into capital projects funds. And in 25, most of that is for the library expansion construction, and then there's also the potential design of the carriage house. And then in 26, it's potential construction of the carriage house. Any questions on this?
Yeah, Jeff, of the 5 years we're looking at, the one with the largest general fund operating revenues is 24, and then it continues to decline after that. How do you make that happen?
Operating revenue.
24,628 versus 24,624.
That's the inclusion of $1 million in capital fundraising that we expect to get from the library, given Tufts organization.
I've got a question here. With the projected fund balance being very high in 23 and 24, obviously with the expenditures increasing, it's dropping down from there. If we get into an inflationary period, how are we protecting that to ensure that it's not devaluing?
Well, we are in an inflationary period.
Exactly.
We're seeing it all around us. We can't really forecast what's going to, what we have done is we've applied our historical averages to 24 through 27 in this plan. We have no idea what's going to happen. It could be much higher than that. It could be deflationary. Best we can do is, I think, apply our long-term averages in those out years because we don't know what's going to happen. And as I said, in the 23-year budget, that's brass tacks. That's what our department heads said at each of their requirements is going to cost this year.
I understand. None of us have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, and we're talking about averages and things like that. With the size of projected fund balance there, all I'm stating here is that puts us at risk if there's an inflationary period in that time to take a significant loss. And so just keep that in mind as we're looking at these different opportunities.
Not sure if this is what you're talking about. But one of the handcuffs we have on us is what we can invest in, and particularly in this investment environment, money we keep in fund balance, we're losing money on because the inflation is through the roof, and we're getting next to nothing in return.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
So money that's in the fund balance, we cannot invest in different vehicles to maintain a strategy to keep from losing money with a high inflationary period. So if
we would want to use it.
What's that?
We want to use it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I have raised in the past the possibility of reexamining that 30% figure for our fund balance.
Understand.
And
And,
we
and
talked
that,
about
that's a,
Further discussion,
different topic. As we're looking at different opportunities,
I was-
whenever we see a fund balance that's very high for the first couple of years, all I want to know, all I want to put out here, my point is, there's a potential risk there for us.
Yeah.
That's all.
I wish I could tell you I was forecasting in my own mind that time a runaway inflation, but I was not, so.
Jeff Morgan, your question about the inflation is just directed at the overall impact which increasing inflation would have on our total expenditures, the general line items and cost to do business. Is that it?
What we're doing is we're relying on a fund balance
Right.
that's collected in the first few years to pay for the next few years. If you collect that early and then you have inflationary periods hit, you have less value of each dollar to then go, and the
Right.
inflation is still going to go. So what happens on there with the inflation is that the expenditures that we have will already have been inflated up after we've collected pre-inflation dollars. That's a risk.
Yeah, it's not a good match. Yeah, thank you. Jeff?
Well, can I say-
Jane? Okay.
So I get it that we want to use that money before its value drops. But I'm also, looking at the long term, concerned about having so many projects that we end up going into debt. Because if we do that, then in the future, I mean, you look back over the last few years, how many surprises have there been that we've had to deal with? And I'm sure that's going to happen in the future too.
Yeah.
Things we can't even imagine that we would need to deal with or spend money on. So we don't want to get ourselves, I don't think, into a position where we've spent so much money and gone into debt to finance some of these projects, and then in the future, we're not able to respond to something new that comes up.
I think that we shouldn't be afraid of debt. Most organizations carry debt. Until this year, we have historically carried debt. And we've maintained a very healthy financial condition in spite of that. Most local governments carry debt. You have to be careful about it and make judicious decisions, but it's a tool to use.
What is the borrowing rate for a municipal government? And does it rise and fall with
Brooke,
the?
would you mind coming? I'm sorry to call you forward. You'll be talking to us a little bit anyway, but would you mind coming forward? This is Brooke Hunter, who is the financial officer of the Village of Pinehurst.
We are coming into a rising interest rate environment with the Fed increasing interest rates once already, and there is a plan over the next year to continue to increase rates over the next year. Right now, it's probably in the 2s, but it's increasing.
I didn't know if
building.
in the state of North Carolina, there is a bargain for municipal governments when they borrow money or not. I'm asking that as someone who doesn't know. I didn't know if there's something we should know.
Right. I mean, we would go out to our banks and get
We go out in
bids
the
just
market.
like anyone else. Right, right. We would not get a bond issuance or anything like that because the kind of debt that we would pursue would just be on a smaller scale. So we typically don't do the bond market. We would be more in just the installment financing market. But yeah, as far the last I heard, it was in around the 2s, but it's climbing now since that time.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yes.
All right. So this is option 2, and this shows the addition of both the ladder truck and the additional fire station, the third fire station. And you see that impact primarily in 26 and 27. You can see the increase in the full-time equivalents, and you see the increase in the projected required tax rate. That's an additional penny in 2026 and an additional half cent on top of that in 2027, with the caveats that I described earlier about the fact that we might be bringing in a penny's worth of revenue in addition to what is built into these numbers based on the state sales tax projections and the revaluation impact that's going to, we'll start to see in 2024, particularly the CPI adjustment on that. You can
Jeff,
see that.
I think this actually calls for 2 cents in fiscal '26. If this 32.5 in 2025 and 34.5
I'm sorry, a penny over what the base plan.
over the base, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's right, yeah. You can see, again, focusing on those bottom two lines, assuming that tax rate structure, we'd be okay with regard to fund balance policy. We'd be okay with operating margin. I mentioned earlier that we like to stay between 89 and 91. There have been times in the past where we've adopted a plan that showed 92 in the 4th or 5th year, and it's always worked out just fine, so we're not real nervous about having that 92 out there in the 5th year. It always seems to work out, probably based on some budget to actual variance stuff that's going on there, but so I mean, this is something that's feasible, and again, like if you chose to go this route, I don't think the impact in 26 and 27 will be as drastic as you see up here right now with regard to tax rate because of the sales tax thing that we just got today. So that is an option. Any questions on this? Okay. And then this is kind of a middling recommendation, if you will. This is just adding the ladder truck without the people. As I mentioned before, we can dual slot the people against the rescue truck and the ladder truck. Both those apparatuses would be right here at Station 91, right next to us, where that would need to be. And you can see that, again, that tax rate structure that showed it across the top is the same one that's in the base plan, and it still works out. Now, you can see more or less. We show the potential or the projection for dipping a little bit below our floor of 30% in 2027 and 26 as well. But the operating margins look very healthy there for us. So again, maybe this is a way to start to bridge that gap with regard to the public safety concerns in the fire department. So again, this is option 3. So I'm going to come back to, there's some things that are moving here. One we know now, and that's the state sales tax projections. And that makes, certainly this plan and the plan before this as well, much more palatable from a tax rate policy standpoint. I'm pretty convinced, I'll project that if you adopt a CPI adjusted revenue neutral tax rate in 2024, it's going to give us additional revenue as well. And the net result is this probably all works out to have the 3rd fire station and the ladder truck. But I would make this observation: neither of those requirements are 2023 requirements. So the staff's recommendation is that you go with the base plan, and we see how this plays out over the next year, and we can always add both those requirements back in next year if things pan out the way I think they're going to pan out.
The staff recommendation is not to include them now. What you're calling is the base plan without them. And then a year from now, reevaluate.
That's right.
Because we'll have more knowledge about inflation, we'll have more knowledge about sales projections, and we'll probably have the reevaluation of property owners.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Anything further on this information?
Jeff, is it, just to draw the page, is it page or slide number 12? That's what you're calling the base plan, correct?
That's right. Yeah. The first 5-year projection I showed you, that's without the ladder truck and without. And so what we're kind of hedging here. We're saying don't put it in the plan, but we think we can accommodate it in the same years that page 13 projects them. We would build that plan next year.
The question about the truck, the ladder truck,
Yeah.
that's been under discussion and for maybe 10 years, but certainly in the last 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, it keeps coming around. Doesn't go away, shouldn't go away, but it seems to be always present. And I'm just wondering if it's there because it's going to be strategically important from a fire department point of view to the kind of services that the fire department wants to provide. And to be prepared, as you said earlier in your comments about the increasing amount, I think really only in the medical district, of the height of buildings there and our ability to meet that need. We know we have some backup from Southern Pines and Aberdeen, but nevertheless, there are circumstances that could happen when they might not be available. And then you mentioned this Quint truck, which has been discussed before as the Swiss Army knife solution to fire ladder trucks, among other things. So I'm just wondering with my council colleagues here whether this year or no later than next, we need to come to grips with this truck need. Whether we need a station or not is yet a different question. But the truck, located at whichever of our 2 stations we now have, might begin to solve that need and maintain fire insurance rates at as low level as we can have them for residents of the Village of Pinehurst, because that's how this acts out to the average resident. We have certain ratings. We've just increased our rating a couple of weeks ago when the fire commissioner of the state was here and awarded us a new favorable rating. But I wouldn't want to see that slip away. And I'm just wondering if we need to maybe take a bite at this truck issue.
It's certainly fair observations. There's 2 issues there. One is, our ability to respond, and the other is the insurance impact. As you called attention to, we did just increase from a 4 to a 2 in terms of our fire rating for our primary district. And we hope that has an impact on property owners' insurance bills. We'll see what actually happens. I can tell you that the addition of a ladder truck won't get us from a 2 to a 1 based on the point allocation. As a matter of fact, we already, even though we don't have a ladder truck, we got half the points required associated with having a ladder truck. And that's because a lot of that's about the equipment. It's not about the truck. It's the stuff you put on the truck, and we just carry that stuff on other vehicles. So, nobody's coming back around here in the near term to do another revaluation to downgrade us. And it's not, we're not going to get to a 1, but I think this is really about what's the most appropriate,
Jeff,
cost benefit on providing effective public safety services.
it would help my decision process to know how many times in the last 5 years we needed to call on Aberdeen or Southern Pines to borrow their ladder truck.
First time I was aware of, a good question for Carlton, the first time that I have seen it in action was in the fire down on Highway 5 a couple weeks ago.
You've been in the job how long?
Going on 7 years.
8 years, 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a rarity when we call.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen some of the time, but that's the,
No,
yeah.
but you're gonna have a memory
Yeah.
when something big like that happens.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, thank you.
Any other council members have any questions or address this issue, if you wish, of the fire truck and how that fits into the equation here? No other questions? Then how do we like the different options here? Jeff is suggesting and has given us some idea that if we adopt the base case, we can still, and would anyway, revisit the issue of the fire truck or other issues that may come along. Jane has pointed out that we always have issues coming along, as well as we project things and think through scenarios. We don't always know what will come up, so we have that to think about for next year as well.
The recommendation from the staff is, in my opinion, the most conservative and gives us the most flexibility. I concur with that.
It's conservative and flexible, Jeff, that's your point. Yeah, okay,
Yes.
the base case. Okay. Any other comments from council members?
Are
Okay.
we,
Well, I think what we're
What are we
doing here
doing?
tonight,
That's what I'm
yeah,
trying to
well, what
figure
we're
out.
doing here tonight is we're actually going a little farther than sometimes we do, I think, in this meeting, and we're trying to confirm to Jeff and the staff that the direction that they have proposed, the base case or the other scenarios, are the track that they should go down in preparing the final budget, which we'll see in May, starting at our first meeting in May. We have a second meeting in May, and we have two special work sessions on the financial, on the budget in the next 5 years. So they want to know, are they on the right, are they headed in the right direction, and is it the direction of the base case, or one of the options that they should pursue to prepare the final plan?
my one question is, at that time in May, we'll get to revisit the possible priorities that we looked at, right?
We always have the ability to rethink something that didn't occur to us tonight. That's always we have that flexibility, but the staff also needs to proceed and
Right.
Yeah.
as confident as we can be.
Until adoption,
Nothing's changed. Nothing happens till we agree.
anything can change.
Yeah.
After adoption, things can change.
That's true, too.
So,
I guess
Yeah.
I have one question. You know, when we get together in May for our budget work, for our work sessions, at that point, I mean, clearly we've got questions about the fire truck. Carlton will be there. He'll hear this. He will come with more information, correct? So we can have more information to make a better decision than we're capable of making tonight. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Lydia, I couldn't hear that. You were talking about Carlton, the fire chief, coming to the
Well-
meeting? I don't know that could certainly happen, but it's the staff and the
Yeah.
planning committee.
we've
Brooke
all
and
talked
everybody.
this out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've talked it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we're asking so many questions tonight that by the time we get together in the next few weeks, Carlton will possibly be able to give us additional information so we can make the decision
Yeah.
that you think we maybe should make.
And we'll know more about the sales tax, and we'll have a little bit better idea of what the inflation rate really is at this point in time. Those things that are still the variables we'll decide upon. Our only deadline is June 30th to have a budget approved and in place, subject to change over time, if needed. I think that one of the keys here, and the council realizes this, and we talk about it a lot, we wouldn't be able to have these sort of project lists and scenarios, base case and all that, if we didn't have a very strong financial position. And that's been the policy of the staff and the council for decades in Pinehurst, I would say. And the luxury of our residents paying their taxes, spending their money here, and watching what we do so that we don't make decisions that they don't like or that are going to get the village into some financial difficulty. And I think that with that stewardship requirement on ourselves, we'll make good decisions going forward on this particular budget. So what I'm hearing, I think, is that it's the base case that the council would like to have you pursue, Jeff, and we'll revisit that in more detail during the month of May.
Super, okay.
All right.
I do have a couple more slides for you here.
As I said, citizen participation, we want you here.
You can see the major capital projects that are in this 5-year plan. Library expansion we talked about before, also the carriage house, parking facility. I mean, you know, that one there, I mean, that's something that's not entirely within our control. You know, we have to negotiate that outcome with another party, and so, you know, we'll see how that develops as we move forward. And then you see the Fire Station 93 that won't be in the plan that we recommend for adoption, but we recognize that we can probably get it put back on that same time frame next year based on the numbers that we think are going to be emerging. And then staffing, I mentioned 23, two more police officers, the loss of half of an inspector in 25, the 3 additional library folks in 26, and there were the 6 potential firefighters in 26 as well that are not in that base plan. All right, so I think we got your direction already, and then here's some way ahead. On the 5th, we'll be delivering the more detailed strategic operating plan to the council and public. I'm sorry, to the council. And then we'll be presenting it at the May 10th meeting for the public's benefit. And then in May 16 and 18, we have the 2 budget work sessions, and then we'll be following that up in, actually, I think it's the second meeting in May, we'll have the public hearing associated with the budget adoption process, and then you'll have the opportunity to approve the SOP and budget in the first meeting in June, and if there's some kind of a hiccup, that gives us the fallback for the second meeting in June. That's the approach that we've typically taken. So
What's the date of the public meeting? Did you set that yet, or?
that would be the 24th of May.
Let's be our second regular meeting of the month. It'll be at that meeting.
It's
Yeah,
our meeting.
yeah,
Okay.
our own meeting, yeah, the regular meeting.
Yeah, I apologize. I probably should have put that on this slide, the full process here, but. Okay?
All right, Jeff, thank you very much for that. Well done. Thank you, council. We'll move then into the item number 5 on our agenda tonight, which is a resolution establishing a flag and lamppost banner policy, which we discussed at the last meeting. You have a policy, I think, Jeff, that you're recommending here. And very good. And for the public's knowledge, this is Jeff Batten, one of our 2 assistant village managers, and Kelly Chance, our village clerk, who maintains all of our records. Thank you.
I'll just give a very brief introduction, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, since she's done the vast majority of the legwork on this policy. We brought this to you 2 weeks ago in a work session. Got your feedback on a couple of things related to having a flag and banner policy, lamppost banner policy. I think what Kelly has brought back to you represents and reflects the direction that you provided at the last work session. And so with that, I'm going to let Kelly kind of take it from there.
Okay, yeah, so what we discussed at the last work session, the recommendations were that the flags were only capable of holding 2, all the posts were only capable of holding 2, so the U.S. flag would be primary, secondary would be the North Carolina state flag, with a couple exceptions that would occur during Fire Prevention Week. At the fire station only, they would be able to fly a commemorative flag, and at times they could also fly the thin red line flag. The other exception was at the police department for the same period during their Officer Appreciation Memorial Week. They would be able to fly a memorial flag, and often at times they would be able to fly the thin blue line flag. The final exception was for the Cannon Memorial Park. We currently have the military flag and the POW flag, so they would be the only 2 flags that would fly there. The last part of the policy was taking into consideration the request that we received to post commemorative items on our our village post, which are around the town. The council's direction was that we would not do that except for events that we as a village were sponsors or co-sponsors, and the cost to produce the banners and for the installation and take down of the banners would be moved to the individuals that were putting on the event.
I think that summarizes it well. It's exactly, I think, what we talked about last month. Are there any questions from the village council for Kelly or Jeff Batten? Seeing none, is there a motion on this? We need to approve this for Jeff's signature, I believe.
I move to approve Resolution 22-7, establishing a flag and lamppost banner policy for the Village of Pinehurst.
That's a motion by Jeff Morgan. Is there a second?
Yes, I second it.
Second by Pat Pizzella. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Kelly, Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Jeff.
Now we'll move into Other business, is there any other business which a council member wishes to bring to the meeting? Seeing none, move on to item number 7, which is comments from attendees. I have quite an extensive list of persons who have signed up tonight, and that's good. We're happy to have input on whatever issues come to the public and they want to make council aware of.
Mr. Mayor?
sorry.
With a large list of folks, if we could take a 3-minute break prior to engaging with that, I'd request that.
I think the folks who are here would like to get on with it, but if we take a short break, it is 6:10. We'll resume at 6:15. Just hang on, folks. We'll be right with you. 6:15. taking your seats, and before I go over the first name who has signed up, I want to make the following. I want to remind everybody of the ground rules of comments. First of all, the Village Council is always appreciative and delighted to have comments from the public, whether it's in written form, verbal form, at our meetings, in between meetings, whatever. Having said that, and noting the number of people we have tonight, I'll just remind you of the guidelines that are on the top of the page of the list that all of you signed who wish to speak. And they are these. Your time to address the council is limited to 3 minutes to allow ample time for others to speak. So I have a little timer here, which I haven't had before, but here it is. It's actually 3 minutes and 5 seconds, so I'm being very flexible. All right. I would, in some seriousness, though, make the following additional comments. First of all, some of you are here who have spoken before on issues that are coming to the council. And I would say there might be one exception here, but pretty much all of you are here to speak on the short-term rental discussions which the council is having and will continue to have in our work session immediately following this meeting. So while we are happy to hear from all of you, if your remarks are redundant to someone else who has just spoken ahead of you, maybe a suggestion I would make is if you wish to step up and say, I agree with the previous person and I've spoken before about it, thank you. Or if you wish to read your comments, that's all right, but I will limit it to 3 minutes. Now, some of you have asked me and others of the council during the break, your name didn't get on the list, will we have time? I don't know. That depends on the amount of time taken by the speakers ahead of you. And I'm not trying to rush anybody, please, but I do know that there are ways that we can do this very effectively, and we know that you will abide by that. So with that, you may use either the the microphones at the seated table here, or use the pedestal that's there. All those microphones are available. And if necessary, I will ask you to speak louder or adjust the microphone so that those who are watching this meeting and those of us who are in the meeting can hear you very well. With that understanding, I'll give the first name and then the second, and every time I call the next person up, I'll tell who's on deck to be ready to speak. So the first name we have tonight is Marianne Wydra, and the second is Carolyn Langston. So Marianne, would you please deliver your comments? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And identify yourself as to name and residence location. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Marianne Wydra, 95 Cantor Lane in Pinehurst, of course. I do want to preface by saying thank you for both sides of, we have a full room and it's good. We need to have a healthy discussion about this. I also want to clarify, I'm not against STRs in the appropriately zoned communities, such as hotels and lodging areas. I'm not against leasing and long-term rentals. I've had two great neighbors, one next to me and another across the street, who rented for 2 years and then bought their homes. And then this is just real quickly, so you know where I'm coming from here. Just from my last presentation, this comes directly out of the pilot. In March of 2022, this year, Darren Burge of Planning and Inspections recorded a 75% increase in STRs from 2020, a one-year period. In June 2021, I see Marcus is here, Coldwell Banker, Advantage Southern Pines, and Sandhill Rental stated that they acquired 20 new rental properties added to their inventory that year. It also stated that the returns on the short-term properties were really good, and it was a going concern. In the same article, a big house located on Linden, and it notes it sleeps 20, was acquired in fall of 2020 by a group of Virginia-based investors and rents out at top dollar. I don't know if it's the same house that they had that massive pool party at, but, my questions, why does the PDO bother to specify zones such as H hotel, HHD residential, or any other zoning for that matter? Why do unregulated STRs not have to comply with the same official zoning ordinances and laws required of hotels like the Carolina? Solid residential communities are the foundation of a thriving community. One need only look at what happens when a neighborhood spirals down from single-family homes to a transitory population. Our major cities are a great example of this. It's a ripple effect. People stop investing in their homes and the buildings become unkempt and substandard. When homeowners can't take the chaos and stress anymore, they sell out. Eventually, the remaining homes are bought at a discount. Everybody left, and all that's left is, I hate to say it, but sort of a slum. Has the vision of the village of Pinehurst changed to become another unregulated STR haven like Myrtle Beach and Wilmington? Will it be done at the expense of the residential homeowners' finances and safety? I'm going to add very quickly here, since I've been here, I've put in 6 figures to rehabilitate my own home. It's not a palace, but I risked a lot of money thinking I was moving into a residential neighborhood. The next thing, very quickly, for thee but not for me. How am I doing on time? Hurry up.
Better.
Okay. Why do STR property owners live in gated, restricted communities, yet are okay with residential neighborhoods around them putting STRs in there for their financial gain? Restricted and gated communities should not be exempt from STRs. What's good for me is good for you. STR property owners should be required to live in the immediate vicinity of the rentals. Residents like myself should not be on the first line to report or mitigate issues, and STRs must be under the same regulation as hotel zoning ordinances. Here's very quickly my call to action, and I'll wrap
Marianne,
this
you're
up.
over time, so quick.
Real quick. Okay. Let us reason together. I think that the current government bodies here did not create this problem. It's been there for a long time. But that time's passed, and the village of Pinehurst must now take responsibility for resolving the problem equitably. The village government must not make regulation decisions behind closed doors. It will further erode trust and add fuel to the fire and cause irreparable damage to the village. If there is any kind of conflict of interest, maybe we should look at an impartial arbitrator.
Marianne, I have to cut it there. Thank you very much for your comments. The next speaker is Carolyn Langstrom, and the person to follow that is Linda Guerra. Carolyn, you can speak from here if you wish, please.
Thank you. Carolyn Langston. I live at 10 McDonald Road East in Pinehurst.
Thank you.
And I live across the street from 2 short-term rentals. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a drunk from across the street in only his skivvies comes to my yard, sits in the middle of my front lawn, under my bedroom window, and starts chattering on the telephone. Call the police. They say, well, you also have to talk to who owns that rental. I have approached them by phone. They have hung up. Now, the owner of that rental is living there temporarily until their home is built. And we had to call the Village of Pinehurst just last week because of all the trash they leave in their yard and around. Also, we had Bikers Week here several years ago. We had 20 bikes across the street living in one house for the weekend. No restrictions. There's nothing you can do about it because the STR owners don't give a damn. Secondly, same house, a group of renters playing ping pong in the garage at 2 in the morning, screaming and yelling. I walked over, asked them to please close the garage door. They're making too much noise, and they weren't gonna. So again, I called the police. This is just a waste of police time. Why can't the people that own these properties make a list of what you can and can't do? If they don't do it and we call the police department, why can't the owner of said property be faced with a fine? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda Guerra, followed by Jake Sutherland and Jeff Sanborn. I'm making a note to myself, and I think Darren must be here. When we get to the work session discussion on this tonight, I'd like to make sure we go over some of the things in the PDO that we that seem to allow certain things or require certain things in the rental area, but we're not clear about that. And I'll discuss that more later, but just a note that we want to go over some of those questions that we hear.
Can I speak from here?
Linda,
Can
go
I-
ahead. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
As I look around the room this afternoon, I see a lot of friends and neighbors, but I'm dismayed that other Pinehurst residents aren't here. And I talk to some people, and they tell me there's no sense in talking to the council because they're not going to listen. This has been kicked down the road for all these years, so they don't come. And then there's some that they don't know what's about to hit them, like me. In my experience, happened last year. Neighbor bought the house. She was in renovating and came over 2 nights later, knocking on my door at 7:30 and wanted to take a shower in my house. I accommodated her. Since the house was sold last year and the house was renovated, small house, it was renovated to accommodate another bedroom so they can have 8 people. Since then, it has been a revolving door every weekend. Pickup trucks, cars, lots of people. I don't know, there could be more than 8 because there's nobody there counting them. There's nobody that ever checks. The furniture on the patio, the cover's been laying in the bushes for 3 weeks. No one's been around to check. And the realtors. A lot of these realtors sold us our dream house with telling us we were going to have safety, we were going to be in beautiful neighborhoods. Now these same realtors are going to sell us down the river, and they want STRs because it's their pot of gold. And they're going to turn Pinehurst into another Myrtle Beach. And actually, I'm very surprised that it's happened like this. I really am. Every time I look at my door, especially on Thursdays, my blood pressure goes up because the driveway's right there. They have an extended parking lot in the back of the house. The driveway, they go in through the back into the garage. Now there's a pool that's going to be uncovered. I never know what to expect on the weekend. My life has been a mess since an STR moved next to me, and I'm really hoping that you're going to do something about it because the people in Pinehurst, we're depending on you to save our homes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd ask you please not to applaud, just listen and respectfully. Jake Sutherland will be followed by Brian Kennedy. Jake?
Who's up, Mr. Mayor? I apologize, sir.
Jake, you are.
Thank you. Jake Sutherland, 120 Market Square in Pinehurst. Good evening. My name is Jacob Sutherland, and I'm the president of the Mid-Carolina Regional Association of Realtors. I own everything new in the Pines, and I operate out of 120 Market Square in Pinehurst. Creating restrictions on short-term rentals in Pinehurst is not a new issue for the village. In 2014, the village passed on an opportunity to ban short-term rentals. Village Attorney Mike Newman warned the regulation would not hold up to a lawsuit. In 2018, the Village of Pinehurst was again exploring the actions they could take to regulate the short-term rentals. The Lake Pinehurst Association had asked the village to create a zoning overlay district covering the 288 lots around the lake and a code amendment to ban rentals of less than 6 months. Village of Pinehurst Attorney Mike Newman told the council at that time that such a step will not survive judicial scrutiny. He said the village would also have to have data to back up claims that it has a problem. It's now 2022, and I would ask the Village of Pinehurst Attorney, would the regulations hold up to the legal scrutiny today based on the results of the short-term rental lawsuit in Wilmington? The NC Court of Appeals has handed down their opinion in the Schroeder versus City of Wilmington case. They have ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, arguing that the current state statutes do not allow for the creating of a short-term rental registration nor lottery system. Flashback to December 31st, 1895. The Holly Inn in the newly named Village of Pinehurst welcomed its first guest. Prior to the construction of the Holly Inn, guests stayed in cottages all around the resort, what is now commonly known as Old Town. Pinehurst roots are actually deeply entrenched in short-term rentals. Direct from the Village of Pinehurst website, For more than a century, Pinehurst has been a sought-after destination. First for those from the Northeast seeking to escape harsh winters, and now for the people around the world who want to play some of the area's 42 outstanding golf courses or enjoy other sporting activities. In today's meeting, I learned that we're actually one of the top 5 destinations. Where will our visitors stay? My family stays in short-term rentals when they come into town. My sister, brother-in-law, and their 4 children. It's not affordable for them to drive down from New York with their family and stay in 2 or 3 hotel rooms to accommodate a family of their size. As president of Mid-Carolina Association of Realtors, I urge the Village Council to consider all the impacts when trying to impose short-term rental regulations. Some of my coworkers could not be here in time to sign up to speak, so if you're a realtor in the room and you're opposed to short-term rental regulations, please stand. Mr. Mayor and the Pinehurst Council, thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian Kennedy, is it Brian Kennedy is next? Nicholas Sino after that. Excuse me, ma'am, I'll take care of the meeting, all right? Thank you. That's not a question that we need to answer. He's given a perspective of that tonight. Thank you very much. I have
sorry.
Brian, do I have the name incorrectly here? I have Brian Kennedy.
Yes, but he had to leave, and he asked me to read this for him.
Brian Kennedy is not here to speak,
No.
is that correct?
Is that okay, or if not, I'll...
I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't believe you're signed up, so,
Yes, I'm signed up also, but he just asked me to read this for him because he had to leave.
are you under 3 minutes?
Oh, yeah,
Please.
okay. This is Brian. Brian says, Pinehurst is built around the resort. He was born here, he lived here, he lives next door to a short-term rental. They've all been respectful. It's important income for the people who own the home. And he says, I do not feel it's the village council's responsibility to regulate who stays in someone's home and for how long. We already have noise ordinances, parking rules, and we should enforce those on a case-by-case basis, not to make more rules that we can't regulate. The Pinehurst Vision is to promote, enhance, and sustain the quality of life for residents, businesses, visitors, not just residents. This area is growing whether we like it or not, and there's always growing pains. The visitors we have here spend money, and it's hard to promote. Come to Pinehurst, but whatever you do, don't stay in the village. That was from Brian, who lives next door to a rental. I'm on the list. Should I wait for my turn?
You'll have to wait your turn. Thank
Okay,
you. And in
that's
fact,
fine.
if your comments are similar to what we just heard, you might want to consider how you wish to make those, but we'll get to that in a few minutes'
Okay.
time. Nicholas Sino, and after that, Bob Coates.
I have time myself, and I'm at about 3:10. I'll try to speed it up. My name is Nicholas Sino, and I'm a resident of the village. My address is 5 Piedmont Lane. I appreciate the opportunity to offer comments this afternoon. I have previously provided material to the council in support of home shares. It is not my intent to rehash that material here, but to offer additional thoughts on the subject. It's a very serious meeting. I wanted to offer a bit of levity, if I could. I am Italian by heritage. I was raised in a house with the belief that the louder you raised your voice, the more right your opinion was. Over time, I have learned that was faulty logic. But it does lend credence to the term vocal minority. We live in a utilitarian society. A utilitarian society is one which provides the greatest amount of good to the most number of people. When we apply this principle to the home sharing industry, the benefits of home sharing extend well beyond the owner of the home. The very first sentence of the statement of intent of the general provisions of the current Pinehurst Development Ordinance plainly states, the village of Pinehurst is a residential and resort community, the major industries of which are recreation, tourism, and a regional medical center, along with the land uses that provide the needed goods and services for the convenience. Recreation, tourism, and a regional medical center all benefit from home sharing. The ordinance goes on to state, to this purpose, those activities and land uses not compatible with the residential and resort area, such as intense industrial uses, extensive commercial districts, structures and signs that are not in context with the village, shall be prohibited. Home sharing is not an intense industrial use. And consolidating home sharing through rezoning would essentially create an extensive commercial district. I would like to make clear that I am empathetic to the concerns of those who oppose home sharing. Concerns over parking and noise and safety are all very valid. However, they are not exclusive to home sharing arrangements. I would encourage the council to address those concerns through ordinances not specific to home sharing. In addition to upholding the principle of a utilitarian society, I believe the council has a responsibility to apply sound judgment in passing ordinances which stand up to legal scrutiny. With that in mind, I would encourage the council to adopt the recommendations as presented by the Village of Pinehurst staff, striking any provisions recently decided by Schroeder versus the City of Wilmington. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sino. The next speaker is Bob Coates, and the one following that is Jerry Board. Mr. Coates.
Bob Coates, 21 Edinburgh Lane. I co-authored a memo with Clint Davidson and Bill Ficklin, which we sent to the Village Council a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to take this opportunity to read it into the record. There are many citizens who feel strongly that short-term rentals are in direct violation of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, the PDO. The PDO sets forth the regulation for what is allowed in various districts. It's the law, not just suggestions or recommendations. We are requesting a formal legal opinion on the legality of STRs as defined by the PDO from the village attorney. Included within the 19 zoning districts defined in the Chapter 8 zoning of the PDO are multiple residential districts. They range from R210, which is 5 acre, to R5, high density, but the same language is applied to each. The district is further intended to discourage any use which would be detrimental to the predominantly residential nature of the areas included within the district. Section 8.5.1a of the PDO, the table of permitted and special uses, is extremely important. The table shows the permitted lodging uses within each district. The lodging types include bed and breakfast homes, boarding or rooming houses, dormitory, hotel, and RV park. For the residential districts, there is only one permitted lodging use. Bed and breakfasts are permitted within R210. No other lodging use is permitted within any other residential district. It's important to note that just prior to the table, there is a note which reads, any use not explicitly allowed in the table of permitted and special uses is prohibited. The enumeration of expressly prohibited uses shall not be deemed exclusive or all-inclusive. There is certainly no question that STRs are lodging establishments. As they are not bed and breakfast homes, they are clearly prohibited in all residential districts. Both the spirit and letter of the ordinances show that STRs are in direct violation of the PDO. We are respectfully asking the Village Council to have the village attorney provide a formal legal opinion to the following questions. Are STOs prohibited by the PDO? And can the existing estimated 368 STRs be shut down? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. Jerry Board, and followed there after that by Beta Lorink. Jerry?
Jerry
Please.
Board,
Thank
3
you.
McDonald Place, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm not opposed to short-term rentals, and I'm not opposed to home sharing. My question is this, Why shouldn't renters and the owners of short-term rentals be held to the same standard of conduct that we ourselves conduct ourselves here in our home? I hope that as you continue to grapple with this issue, that you'll be able to develop a set of standards that is commiserate with the character of this beautiful place, our home, because there is no other place like Pinehurst. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't read the next name too well. Is it Beata Lorink? And the last name is Lorince?
INC, Lawrence.
INC. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Beata Lawrence of 315 Beulah Hill Road North. Some of you all may recognize me as my picture apparently has been passed around completely out of context to most of you. I found that about a couple weeks ago. I am here to represent, as what I will jokingly say, the evil STR owner, because it really does feel like a little bit of a lynch mob here. It's astounding to me as someone who loves real estate, has owned many homes, and is pumping an incredible amount of capital into my home in Pinehurst to update it. It is over a 100-year-old home, and I purchased it with the intention of beautifying this community that I fell in love with over a year ago. It is disappointing to me that so many people are lumping in a couple of bad apples with the entire orchard. I have yet to hear overall anyone actually speak to STR owners as a whole. I have met many of them across the years. I have run STRs on the coast for over 7 years. And my only goal is to be a good citizen, is to be a good neighbor, to attract quality folks that want to come and experience the town they're visiting and contribute back to the local economy. I urge everyone in this room to actually speak to more than one STR owner. Most of us are here to truly improve homes and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Webster, followed by Samantha Cole.
John Webster, 140 West Mackenzie. I think I must be the one exception who wants to talk about something else right now, or at least initially. And I want to talk about your 5-year plan. And it's more of the same. The tax rate goes up every year. And every time we have a 5-year plan, the next year of that 5-year plan has another tax rate increase. And as we talk about what's going to happen in the future with the inflation adjustment to this, what worries me is that half of the people who live in Pinehurst are retirees, and not everybody has a CPI adjustment to their income every year. So it's very worrying when I see projects, which I think, frankly, are unnecessary, heaped into this 5-year plan, because it will mean that everybody's tax rate is going to go up, not rate, the amount they pay. It doesn't, we can talk about what the value of the houses are and what the rate is, but it's the dollars that people are going to have to take out of their pocket and put into here. And some of these are astounding. We need a car park for what? For the employees of the various establishments around Pinehurst, so we can provide a car park for them. I mean, that I don't understand. And that's not a small amount of money. We also have beautification of Village Place, or whatever it's called. The people who should be paying for this are the people who have the businesses there, not the, not the residents. And we need a high ladder. Well, a few years ago, we decided to give as much latitude as possible to the medical district to have as high a building as they wanted. Well, it's coming back to, now we have to pay for a high ladder. And especially for an area which doesn't pay any taxes anyway, because the medical community doesn't pay taxes. But yet the residents, once again, have to pay for this. So I didn't see a total for the debt which has been contemplated. This is something that we have reduced to the point of zero, and now we're talking about having to, everything can be resolved with debt. And I also remind people, we were all very happy to take on the library, but now we're going to pay for it. So my request to you is that although that's not in the 23 budget, that you be careful with the following years. And then a couple of words on STRs. I think you've all heard me on the subject before. I mean, I believe, like Bill Coates does, that they're not allowed, where the staff is very happy to remind us about what Southern Pines does the whole time, but Southern Pines doesn't allow them in their single-family residences. So why are we? So I have a feeling of frustration that this has been going on for so long, and we're just getting to the point where it's going to be out of control. And the final point on that is that, I keep hearing that this is economically beneficial to Pinehurst. When I look at the finances or the revenue of Pinehurst, I see an occupation tax, which goes to pay for advertising for more tourists to come here, and I see that we get part of the sales tax. But on the other hand, we have less residents, and therefore we get a smaller share of the residential tax. Not of the residential tax, of the sales tax, because that's based on population. And I think one cancels the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha Cole, followed by, is it Marcus LaRose or someone from the firm? Samantha Cole, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and board members. My name is Samantha Cole. I live at 393 Lakeside Drive in Aberdeen, and I'm here to discuss short-term rentals. I personally own 2 vacation rentals in Pinehurst and 1 long-term rental. Additionally, I co-own and operate LaBelle Vie Property Management and currently manage 6 vacation rentals and 3 long-term rentals in Pinehurst. I'm here today to share my experience as a manager and owner. In both roles, my vacation rentals are managed as if I personally own them. I'm oftentimes present before, during, and after cleanings. I clean up trash in the yard. I ensure shrubs are trimmed, grass is mowed, trash cans are pulled in. I've been known to blow pine straw out of the driveway, and I have definitely picked up my fair share of pine cones. However, I believe we can all agree beauty is superficial, so let's move on. The best managers find balance between managing the look of a home as well as the quality of tenants and the issues that arise, which is largely achieved through communication. I personally know and collaborate with the top professionals in my field and can confirm we follow this practice. I would like to share a recent experience when communication won. Our visitors want to enjoy the nostalgic itch by sitting on a deck, enjoying a beverage, and enjoying the majestic views Pinehurst offers. They don't want their children video recorded as they play in the backyard during daylight hours. This is the most recent example of a neighbor harassing a tenant I've encountered, but it is definitely not the only one I could provide. I'm sure the neighbor's intentions were justified in their mind, but they should recognize how creepy it was for the parent to have this happen to their children. I fielded the frantic call and de-escalated the situation and kept the police department from being called. Was it the correct call? I know it was, because I'm involved in the management of the house and I know the neighbors very well. Luckily, the harassment was short-lived and the tenant enjoyed the remainder of their stay without incident. This was a win. The tenant knew who to call and could easily find the information and the number with ease. This is an average day in my life. It's about balancing the wants of our visitors with the needs of the residents. That day, I worked as hard for the neighbor as I did my owner, and neither one of them know anything about it. I believe my management firm is one of the best, not because we are perfect, but because we care, we are involved, and we work to create a win-win situation for everyone all the time. And every property manager that I know operates by that same principle. I will leave you with a few last thoughts. How do we want Pinehurst remembered? The fact that residents feel empowered enough to video children at play and think it supports their negative vacation rental agenda should be both jaw-dropping and eye-opening. Lastly, I listened to you all discuss earlier inflation, debt, and budgets in excruciating detail. Please recognize this room is largely packed because placing limitations on short-term rentals will create a significant debt and budget issue for many of us. This is on top of the inflation issues that we are all already dealing with. This is our livelihood. Please give us consideration.
Thank you. Marcus LaRose, followed by Don Hunter.
I've got my little timer too, so I'll try to make sure we keep it to 3 minutes here. Good evening. My name is Marcus LaRose. I live at 85 Ponte Vedra Drive. I currently manage 45 properties throughout the Pinehurst area, so I'm also here representing all 45 homeowners that are in favor of short-term rentals. I'd like to point out that just because somebody says that there are issues with short-term rentals doesn't mean that there necessarily are. Just because somebody doesn't like living next to a short-term rental doesn't mean that they are a problem. I went down to the police station today and I pulled out a report from the last 30 days. It's a 102-page report. There are over 2,200 incidents on this list. 6 of them were noise violations. I did research. 2 of them are residential properties that are not short-term rentals. 3 of them are condos. 1 was a vacation rental in 30 days, when we've had over thousands of people come here. If vacation rentals are a problem, I'm 100% behind it, and I want to help you with a solution. But to first fix the problem, you have to determine if there is a problem. I make a proposal to the council that you direct Derek Birch to form an ad hoc committee made up of 50% from those who are opposed against short-term rentals and 50% that are for short-term rentals. They are to judge them with 3 issues. First of all, what constitutes a problem? Is it 1 noise violation? Is it 5 noise violations? Is it 10 trash cans being left out? Determine the bar. Figure out what the bar is first. We're in the busiest golf season of the season. Spend the next 60 days studying police reports, getting information from the council. Find out if that bar is over, if they've raised over the bar. And then from there, you can make an educated, honest decision. This is a very serious issue. Pinehurst Resort is founded as a resort community, and every single resident, business owner, waiter, bartender will be affected by short-term rentals if they are no longer. To point out Jeff's points, without the sales tax for vacation rentals, I did the calculations, you're going to have to add 8 cents instead of that 1 penny. Vacation rentals make up 20% of the room nights in the entire county. Majority of them are in Pinehurst. With the price of everything going up, Pinehurst economy will struggle without short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don Hunter, followed by Cindy Kennedy.
Mayor, Council, I'm Don Hunter. I live at 110 Highland Road in Southern Pines. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Country Club in North Carolina, and I represent 14 owners of properties that rent from member to member inside the gates of the community. First, Mayor, I'd like to commend you for how you started the meeting. You started the meeting talking about our history and the celebrations of Tuft and Olmsted that were coming up. And I think that we're always grounded by those things. This community was designed around the guest experience. This is one of the few communities in the world that was designed so well around the guest experience. And it has been managed over a very long period of time in a way that it hasn't turned into Myrtle Beach. Nobody wants that. You're right, nobody wants that. But at the same time, our replacements when we're long gone, just like Tuft, when he thought about Pinehurst, he thought about the replacements and how this machine will keep working, how that city budget and this dream can keep being built over a period of time. I'll give you a statistic in the Country Club in North Carolina. Over the last 2 years, 27 national members became local members. Now, that's not important to this town, but it is important to this town. It created new residents. In 2022, that number went to 33. So these were people who used our rental program. They became members, they used our rental program, and now they're residents. They're the retirees that are here now. The retirees that are here next are your responsibility to make sure that that experience still happens. Now, I personally am opposed to anything that would stop that in this community, not just in CCNC, but the entire community. I think that's a huge responsibility on your shoulders as you weigh how to deal with certain unruly people. In the situation in the speech where she talked about somebody sitting under her windowsill that was intoxicated, that person should have spent the night in jail and faced a judge in the morning. Those people should feel unwelcome in our community. And I'm sure that Mr. Tuff would have ran it that way when he was in charge of things here. So, Mayor, when we look at this problem, we need to look at it whether it's a rental problem or a police problem. And you've got a really great new chief of police, and I think he's doing a fantastic job. And we just need to make sure that when those calls happen, they get cleaned up fast, and that we continue to invite the people to join our community that fit in. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Cindy Kennedy. Now, Cindy, you spoke earlier on behalf of a relative, I'm going to guess, Brian Kennedy. Are you speaking now about short-term rentals again, or?
Yes, I'm speaking about, as being an owner of a short-term rental.
Please proceed, but be aware of our time.
Okay, thank you for all you do for the Village Council does for this area, and thank you for allowing us to speak. We have owned property in Pinehurst since 1973. We've been renting property in Pinehurst since 1981. We have had very little, if any, problem with any of our renters. I understand the situation that you're in trying to decide this, and I agree with a lot of what these other people have said, and they said a whole lot more eloquent than I can, but and this is more on a personal level. My husband and I were teachers, and we had to supplement our income with rental property to make it, to raise our family here in Pinehurst in the early 70s. When we still have to do that now that we're retired. We continue to rent short-term rentals, and we've met a lot of nice and respectful people. We've had wonderful guests. We've become good friends with a lot of them. I abide by all of the rules. I follow up, like some of the ladies said, they follow up and they check their property. They make sure everything is up to par, just like it was when the people came and left. And we have no trouble with our guests. And if we do, we handle it ourselves. We don't rely on anybody else. We're there to accommodate whatever their needs are and to solve a problem if there's a problem. I think if the other owners did that, we wouldn't have this problem. And I believe that the Village Council can handle this and manage this, working with the rental people. And our neighbors respect us, and we respect them. And we've asked our neighbors to let us know if there's ever any issues. It's a very personal thing to us. I don't have a whole lot of these. We just have a couple, and we manage them like they're our home, and we take good care of them. We would expect the other homeowners to do the same thing, and I realize that that's not always the case. When we moved here in 1973, Diamond Head was building the condos and the tree houses, and they're still here today, and the Village Council worked with them and dealt with them and managed to keep the village atmosphere that you're trying to do too, and we hope that you can do that. The Village Council and the property owners then managed to work together to keep the historic atmosphere of the village that we have today. And we still have what they started out with in 1973 before Diamond Head came in and started making it very commercial. So please keep in mind that your decision will affect people and their livelihood forever how large they are or ever how small they are. And I have faith that the village council can work together with the real estate people. So I am for STRs, and I think that it's especially important with the pandemic to keep the economy going here, because people came to our rental when the pandemic was hitting because we took care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Alan Torpa. And I'm showing here Marcus LaRose again. I'm going to superlate.
I live at 125 Turtle Point, and I'm in agreement with people who are worried about these short-term rentals, so I won't take too much time. But there is a short-term rental across the fairway from me. They have 8 cars in the front yard, large telephone pole-sized flagpole, and they have floodlights shining into my house that are on 24 hours, 7 days a week. It looks like a used car lot, not like a charming, vibrant community. So I hear people saying that there are some people that are responsible in the way they run their short-term rentals, and I applaud those people. But clearly, without regulation, people are free to pursue profit however they wish. And I think it's highly unrealistic to expect that people are just going to be nice folks and do what they need to do. The person that owns this facility that shines the lights into my house, I've talked with other neighbors. They don't know who it is. No one can contact the person. We have no way of changing anything. I had another neighbor who was shining a light. I crossed the fairway, talked with him, we had a nice chat, and he made accommodations, no problem. He lives there, but whoever owns this facility across from me I doubt if they live in the community, and there's some question as to whether they even live in the country. But, you know, some regulation is necessary in these cases. You can't just expect that people are going to behave themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torpa. I believe it's Kathy LaRose then who wishes to speak. And that'll be followed by Lynn Fuller, please.
Hi, I'm Kathy LaRose. I live at 85 Ponte Vedra Drive. I have been a realtor in Moore County since 1996. I would like to, and I'm responsible for hundreds of millions of sales in Pinehurst over these years. And I would like to address specifically the comment that has been made that the banishment or strict regulation of vacation rentals would not affect your property values. And I'm here to tell you right now that even just recently over the last few weeks, a tremendous amount of our real estate client base are investors or people that want to come to Pinehurst but can't afford to live here full-time now but can buy an investment property. And I can tell you just over the last couple of weeks, we're already seeing those people go away from real estate because they're terrified as to what this council is going to decide. So I just want to I hope that you consider that. I hope that you really consider what just happened in Wilmington with the lawsuit results there. And other than that, I very much agree with everything that Mr. Hunter from the Country Club of North Carolina had to say, as well as Jacob Sullivan and Marcus LaRose. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Fuller, followed by Michelle Saunders. Is it Lynn?
Lane.
Wayne.
Lane, L-A-Y-N-E. Yes, and thank you, Mr. Strickland, for replying to my email a couple weeks ago.
Thank you.
And number one, fire truck. My dad was a fireman 35 and a half years. He drove one of those ladder trucks. They used it more than once in a 7-year period. That's a lot of money to spend on one of those if you already got reciprocals with someone else. Short-term rentals, I'm in favor of them. I own a home here on Everett Road. I do not rent it, but I don't want anyone taking my ability to do that, especially when a US Open week comes up, because that can be you'll need a lot of accommodations during that time. And I know you guys are kind of in a tough position. I used to be a president of a HOA board at the beach with 118 units in it, and there were a lot of times when I made 117 unit owners happy, and 118 was just mad. By putting a limit or governing the short-term rental process, I mean, and you can put guidelines out there for it, but don't make it egregious where you're taking money out of people's pockets. You'll have people who will buy a home down here, they will rent it until they can get retired, and then move down here full-time. I did ask you in the email about problems other than the one party I heard about. We got a drunk guy wearing underwear and a ping pong game that got out of control. Now I've got 2 other examples of that. But I've been in North Carolina my whole life. I don't want someone taking my rights away from me. And again, I don't rent. If I do in the future, so be it. But I'm just asking you not to take money out of people's pockets. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Saunders, followed by Heather Taylor. Michelle Saunders. Heather Taylor. Philip Sunia. Philip.
I'm representing the Army while I'm here. I was on my way home, and I heard about this meeting, so I thought I'd stop by. Especially since I'm like 12 days from retirement. So
Just speak into the microphone just a little better. Thank
Especially
you.
since I'm about 12 days from retirement, and so I heard about this, and I wanted to bring up a couple points that I think might be worthwhile to recognize here. What's my background? 3 master's degrees, completing my PhD in public policy, specifically focused on property rights. So as I'm getting ready to publish my book on this subject, I thought it might be interesting to bring some of that information here. I would say probably the best way to resolve this, or at least address it, is have a moderator or have a mediation element where you're able to meet and then have someone that has that background, economic background, public policy background, so they can take what people are feeling and translate it to what the real results will be, because that tends to be what people forget. This is what you feel. This is what you're asking for. Here's what the effects are going to be in their primary and secondary and tertiary courses. So I think that's the best solution set, and that's not a solution set now. That's a solution set to have people meet to discuss it and have a neutral party with the background that can help them through that process. Now I can tell you what the academic works say. Academic works for private right or private property rights for short-term rentals say the following. And this is published in May of 2019, and it is focused on 17 individual city studies earning 6 different parameters, and what they end up with is the following. Short-term rentals do not affect large hotels at all. They don't affect them. Item number 2, they actually increase occupancy rates at small hotels. Believe it or not, that's what the stats say. Item number 3 is that they typically do not increase rates, your per month rates on rentals, because they're different markets. Some people want to have safety, less risk in order to have a long-term lease. In order, they'll get less revenue. Those individuals that want to invest will get a higher return, but a lot more work behind it. And I don't think that's looked at enough. There's a lot of work behind doing something like a short-term rental, but it does increase sales tax tremendously inside. And so those numbers correlate directly on the amount of revenue that you'll receive in sales tax. And so that gives a local community a lot more flexibility. I would say regulations in general will do one thing for you. They will eliminate every small business that owns one of those. And they will take whoever has the greatest amount of capital, and that individual will be able to prosper. I explained economies like this to people. An economy is like a washing machine. Anybody have a washing machine? You look inside of it, you see all the little holes in the tub? A washing machine does not get closed clean by pumping water in and pumping it out. It gets closed clean by the number of holes. Those number of holes are all these small business owners. That's what will make a difference in an economy. And that's not me speaking from passion. That's me talking to you as an economist, telling you what works and what doesn't. If you pull that away, if you take those rights away or you even hint at some kind of draconian measure, there are some catastrophic effects that will occur. You will see automatic drops in your overall sales price on homes. A lot of these are retirees and investments. And the second item you'll see is commercial property numbers drop. There is going to be a recession. That is coming. When the bond yields invert, like they did on March 21st, that signals a recession within 12 months. That's coming. The way to prepare for that is to advertise and to create as open an environment for travel as possible. But that's just me as an economist speaking. The answer, I would say, has somebody with a public policy, economic background to sit down, talk to both sides, probably get a pretty easy solution set if we can do it with segregation. Thanks.
Sir, before you go, you didn't put your address here.
Oh, I'm sorry, 29 Bedford Circle, number 6.
29 Bedford Circle. Thank you. Donna Outer, followed by Jeff Heinz.
Good evening. You've heard from people who have a nice background in economics. You've heard from people who are really upset about naked people in their yard, naked drunk people in their yard. I want to tell you about the joy I find in being an Airbnb owner. And I'm a new realtor, so I can't say that I've made any money yet because I don't even have a client. So I can even take that off. But I own an Airbnb, a 4-bedroom, 4-bath, and I have a 4.98 rating on Airbnb because of the service I provide. My mother was has a PhD in home ec, and I loved serving people growing up. She taught me well, and that's what I enjoy doing. In the process, I am making money, but I have stayed home with my children. Even though I'm educated, I stayed home with my children. My husband's an Army chaplain, and we made that choice. So we're a one-income family, and this is the way I contribute to our family. I serve other people. And there are very specific ways that I feel like I have been able to serve people with, and I've never had a single police officer at my Airbnb. The worst thing that's ever happened is someone burned a hole in a pillowcase because they put it on top of a lamp in a year and a half. And so I think that there's an easy solution, not an easy solution, but a workable solution so that both sides of the coin are finding productivity in their property that they own, whether they live there or whether they rent. There are so many, like I vet the people that I allow they have to sign something. They see very clearly what I expect. I am in touch with them. I contact them if they can call me at any time. They're just, I know some people have more Airbnbs than I do. However, even a property manager should be in touch with those people because it's a relationship. It's communication. I want people to enjoy visiting the area. I want them to want to come back. I want them to find that they want to continue to come back. So I guess I had a lot of ramblings, but that's the main thing I wanted to say.
Donna, I need your address too.
I just purchased a property on Morganton, 1135 Morganton Road.
1135 Morganton.
Yes, it hasn't closed yet.
Thank you. Jeff Heinz.
Good evening again. I'm Jeff Heinz, 225 Lake Forest Drive Southwest in Pinehurst. Mayor, you mentioned at the beginning of the comment period that there has been a lot of discussion about this and that there's very little new on either side. I think that's been borne out by much of the discussion tonight. We did hear a rather disturbing story about some drunk in a woman's front yard in her underwear, and then disappointingly we heard somebody make light of that, and I think that's unfortunate. What is new since the last time we were together is the Wilmington case, and I urge you to read it. I urge you to talk to your lawyer about it because it unequivocally gives you the power to regulate short-term rentals. There are all manner of conduct-based common sense regulations that you can adopt that will not unduly interfere with any responsibly managed and responsibly occupied short-term rental that were specifically affirmed as lawful under Wilmington. Provisions like occupancy limits, provisions like the delivery of health and safety requirements, provisions like instructions as to how to contact the owner or the rental agent in the event of an emergency. There is a laundry list of those, and you can adopt them for the benefit of everybody in this village. This discussion has been going on now for I don't know how many months. We've come here every 2 weeks for seemingly, it seems like I had a full head of hair when we started coming to these meetings. The fact of the matter is this discussion has occurred every 2 weeks for however long it's been. And you are the impartial arbiters who need to make these decisions. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security that a mediator can come in and bring the parties together and cobble together some sort of a consensus solution. That's your jobs, and you've been doing it conscientiously and consistently for the last 3 months. I encourage you now to finish the job. We are now at a point where we know what the issues are, pro and con. We know what the problems are, and we know how they can be resolved, or at least regulated. And safeguards applied to benefit all of us. And now we have the Wilmington decision that tells us that it's lawful to do so. So I encourage you to get on about that business. Different subject. John isn't the only one who was an exception to the short-term rental people on the list. The Neighborhood Advisory Committee is also on your agenda tonight. As I said last time, it's a very important institution. It works very well. Could it be improved? Probably. But in the improvement process, please don't allow yourselves to discard some of the things that make it best, the ability to have a dialogue between citizens and staff and you all as government officials. And let's not make it more cumbersome than it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. That is the last person signed up, and we've been at this for 1 hour and about 3 minutes. I'm aware that there are at least a couple of people who were not here early enough to sign up and who may wish to speak. Is it council's desire that we should take a few more comments here or close the discussion at this point? Anybody have any strong feelings on that?
If someone wants to speak, I think this is the.
I totally agree.
opportunity.
I'm here all night till
Are there persons who wish to speak on any topic here tonight? Yes, ma'am. Please come to the stand here.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Fisher. I reside at 15 Carolina Vista Drive in Pinehurst. And I've listened to both sides, and those that are doing it well shouldn't have anything to worry about if appropriate regulations are put in place to hold those that aren't doing it well accountable. Just because you don't live across the street from a VRBO or short-term rental doesn't mean that you're not impacted by one. We've had over $5,000 of items stolen from our yard. I've watched the drunk golfers walk from the resort down our street, stand by the fence. Next thing you know, something's missing. So those that are concerned and are doing it well should not be concerned. It's those that are not doing it well. If you employ the correct regulations to hold everyone accountable to the same standard. I think also there is a reason that police records maybe don't show this. It's because people are intimidated to call the police over someone loud in their street or walking through their driveway. If there was an app where someone could take photos or send a message to it's recorded about a particular VRBO record, then VRBO or short-term rental owners will know that people will have the opportunity to either anonymously or state their name and address as to what the issue is. Then when a policeman is called, they can pull that up and say, we've had 5 other comments about this. Or when you reach a certain point, the homeowners put on notice. That way, people that are intimidated by calling the police or don't feel that it's appropriate will still have an opportunity to voice their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other persons who wish to speak on any issue tonight? The man in the, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jim Fisher, 15 Carolina Vista Drive. I'm going to speak to one issue that I haven't heard either for or against speak to, and that is the issue of ownership of short-term rentals. I don't know how many, our real estate friend back here, I don't know where you live, but he asked everybody to stand up who was for the short-term rentals or representing the real estate trade. I don't know how many people in that group who actually live and vote in Pinehurst are, but the point is that the insidiousness of short-term rentals is that these people don't live here. The people who are, many of them who own them don't live here, but everyone who comes through a short-term rental doesn't live here. They don't vote here. They don't worship here. They don't send their kids to school. They don't pay taxes here. And that's what happens to a community that becomes transient. You end up having a transient community that isn't a community. It's just visited. And I don't think that's what we want here. I don't even think the short-term rental people want that either, because that destroys what is making their economic boon. So I think it's important that there be control over it. I'm not saying, I don't think anybody's talking about banning it. I don't think they're trying to ban it at all. I don't want to ban them. I think there's an economic element that needs to be here like that. And I think there should be exceptions for the US Open and some of these larger tournaments that come here. So anyway, I think there's ways that can be done for both. But I think that the need is to maintain the community, keep Pinehurst, Pinehurst. Otherwise, even the short-term rentals won't be acceptable. So just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I think the gentleman in the light blue shirt at the back, please. And I'm only seeing two more, and so I'm going to cut it after that point, but please speak, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mark Caulfield. I live in Southern Pines at 340 West Delaware. But
Sorry, sorry, I'm going to have to make notes here, so just real slowly, and it won't count against you 3 minutes. First name?
Mark, M-A-R-K.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
M-A-R-K. Last name?
Caulfield, C-A-U-L-F-I-E-L-D.
And the address is?
340 West Delaware in Southern Pines.
Southern Pines.
Yeah, but I own property in Pinehurst as well.
I gathered that.
Yeah.
Please proceed. Thank you.
So, listening to both sides, I can understand that nobody wants to have a bad neighbor, but a bad neighbor can also be a homeowner. And so regulating or lumping everybody together just seemed unfair. And, but I think that there can be some wisdom from this council of saying these are things that are going to happen. Pinehurst is growing, the entire county is growing, and we have to manage our growth. And so I'm for free market, and that includes vacation rentals. I think people should be able to use their property as they see fit, but also within the law. And I wouldn't condone anybody having somebody come into their house, take a shower, which I thought was crazy, but also having, things that are disturbing to the neighbors. And I think that you guys have the power to regulate that and to make some rules that make sense. So thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one other gentleman sitting back here, and I think Mr. Goodman, if I have it right, wishes to speak. Yes, sir, go right ahead. Please come up. And very slowly, give me your first name.
Jacob Kirby.
Ooh. How do you spell it?
A-R-B-Y.
Your first name again?
Jacob.
Jacob. And where do you reside, sir?
15 Middlebury Road in Pinehurst.
15 Middlebury. Thank you, sir.
I also have about 17 other houses in Pinehurst, in pretty much every district available. But what I've noticed in the construction business, real estate business that we're in, is kind of the opposite of what some of these folks have said is what short-term rentals have really done. It is provided people an alternative source of income, and in that, an investment into a property, which is upfitted the property. It has increased property values around it. Myself has done several in the village that has turned property that was almost dilapidated, almost a tear down, and turned it around and just, made it new. Without short-term rentals, would that have happened? Probably not. Obviously the demand, this room was pretty full. A lot of people were pretty passionate. If you take short-term rentals out of the equation, what does it look like? We put hotels up and down 15501, and then this room is going to be really full. So I think regulation may be good. Some of these stories I haven't noticed myself or heard of. A family member of mine has 7 Airbnbs here in town, and none of the stories that I've heard are anything that we've heard. But I just respect all of you guys and think that you guys will make the right decision. But Pinehurst has always been transient, so to say that it's going to be because of short-term rentals is kind of odd. So that's all.
Thank you, sir. Next and last.
Hey, Brandon Goodman, 155 East Indiana Avenue, Southern Pines. So I do have a vacation rental directly across the street from my house, and I have 2 within a block. I don't have the issues that others have espoused here. Not to say that it can't happen, I just haven't experienced it. But I do want to echo the call from the gentleman that spoke about the importance of dialogue. And at this time, I do believe it's also a good time to have a stakeholder meeting between those that have had issues and folks that own. I have 3 vacation rentals in the village, and I think it's important for those 2 groups to get together and maybe even come up with some recommendations to move this. No one, in my previous conversation here, I said no one wants nuisance properties. The people that own properties, vacation rentals, they don't want nuisance properties, and definitely the neighbors don't want nuisance properties next to them. There was a lady that spoke earlier about the need for folks that are here on vacation, staying in one of these vacation rentals, living here just like the folks that own their home. I agree. That's exactly what should happen. And when there are outliers, they should be dealt with. But there are ordinances already that are enforceable for a lot of the issues that I've heard here today. And there are general statutes for other issues. And I think that's probably a first path, along with a stakeholder meeting between opposing parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that concludes those who wish to speak tonight. And I appreciate everyone's ability to abide by the time limit for the most part. With that, we'll move then to agenda item number 8 on our regular meeting, which is a motion to adjourn and to enter a work session. We'll take a brief break between the meetings, but not more than about 5 minutes. Is there a motion to adjourn? That's a motion to adjourn the regular meeting by Jane Hogeman. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Pat Pizzella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned. We'll enter the work session at 7:35.